You know how people sometimes tell you a show is amazing, but you just have to push through season 1 or book 1 before it actually gets any good? I hate that. And unfortunately, that's exactly what people told me about Demon Slayer. It's great, just get through season 1, maybe even a little further than that. Once you get past the first stretch of the story, then it gets good. But I want to be hooked to stories from the beginning, because I think a good writer's job is to be compelling now and later. And to be fair, Demon Slayer absolutely has some gems once it gets going. There's this really great theme in the show about the human spirit never giving up in the face of hopelessness, which is super powerful because the villain we're dealing with in this show feels like the most terrifying, psychotic version of Dracula I've ever seen on screen. But season 1 is still a slog. I came very close to dropping the show entirely, which would have meant missing out on everything great that came later, all because the first stretch of the show was such a drag to watch. It was so boring because I had almost no reason to care about Tanjiro or his little sister Nezuko. And that's saying something because Nezuko is transformed into a literal demon in the first episode. So I started to wonder, how could you rewrite these two leads, these two siblings, so audiences can actually care about what Tanjiro and Nezuko are walking into? But first, for anyone who hasn't seen Demon Slayer, here's the original season 1 concept in about 15 seconds. Tanjiro is a kind-hearted boy living on a remote mountain with his family, until one day he returns home to find them slaughtered by a demon. The only survivor is his sister Nezuko, but she's been transformed into a demon herself. Tanjiro learns that unlike other demons, Nezuko has retained her humanity and refuses to harm human beings. So Tanjiro ends up joining the Demon Slayer Corps, a secret organization dedicated to hunting demons, while searching for a way to turn Nezuko back into a human and find the demon responsible for killing his family, Muzan, the first and most powerful demon, also known as the Demon King. That's the story you know. But what if I rewrote season 1 of Demon Slayer to fix its biggest weakness? Tanjiro and Nezuko are not as compelling as they should be early on. They're boring to watch, and it's hard to care about them. With that in mind, here's my rewrite of Demon Slayer season 1. So episode 1 of Demon Slayer opens with our protagonist, a 13-year-old boy named Tanjiro, living with his family on an isolated mountaintop. He carries a lot of responsibility in the family as the eldest son. In the original story, Tanjiro is leaving the house to sell charcoal in the town at the base of the mountain. It's New Year's, so his mom wants him to sell as much charcoal as he can that day. It's also snowing, which means he can't bring his siblings along on the cart like he usually does, because it's too icy today. And if you've already seen or read this story, you know exactly where this is going. This is the setup that gets Tanjiro away from home for the day. And while he's gone, his family gets attacked by a demon and killed. But we're not there yet. Right now, his family's still all alive, and the story sets up Tanjiro's family as pleasant, kind, a little flat personality-wise, if I'm being honest. But hey, these characters aren't sticking around for long, so okay, we'll go with it. Here's where my first change comes in. Instead of the snow being the only reason Tanjiro leaves home by himself, I'm adding something that gives him a little more responsibility for why he's the only one who leaves the house that day while the rest of his family stays behind. I'm thinking, that morning, Tanjiro's out in the woods, before the sun rises, and he's practicing the fire-breathing dance his father used to perform every New Year's before he died, a dance that he taught Tanjiro to do when he was just a little kid. Now, this fire-breathing dance is a family tradition that doesn't get introduced to us until near the end of season 1, and it ends up playing a huge role in one of Tanjiro's biggest fights. But I never liked that the original show gives us 0 hints about this tradition until that fight basically forces it in at the last second. Anyway, back to what I'm picturing for this rewritten opening scene. When we first meet Tanjiro, he's out in the woods, super early in the morning, and he's practicing this dance by himself. We don't know why yet. Like, why is this kid dancing out here alone at dawn? Maybe he's struggling with it, because a big part of the dancing technique is breathing. It's supposed to give you serious stamina and keep you warm even in freezing conditions. I would have it so right now on the mountain, it's not snowing yet, but it's super cold. It's about to snow. And because Tanjiro hasn't fully mastered the breathing part of this dance, he's freezing his butt off trying to do the footwork properly. That's really the only part he has a handle on that his dad taught him. Maybe his dad, before he died, told Tanjiro to practice this dance every single day, and Tanjiro's been keeping that promise ever since, long after his dad's gone. You could even show this instead of explaining it. Like, what if Tanjiro carved a little notch in a tree trunk nearby, like with a small knife, every time he practices? And the trunks around that spot where he's dancing could be covered in tally marks, showing that he's been practicing for years without fail every morning. I feel like setting up this visual up front of him diligently practicing this dance tells us a lot about who Tanjiro is. He's disciplined, responsible. He misses his dead father a lot, and this dance is a way of him staying close to him. So then in this opening scene, Tanjiro would stop mid-dance, and he notices it's about to snow. Oh shoot, what time is it? He totally lost track. So he could hurry home, the snow piling up fast around him. His mom will be waiting at the house, and she's not thrilled. Where were you? You should have left for town hours ago. It's New Year's. Tanjiro could apologize, telling her he was practicing the fire-breathing dance. So Tanjiro's mom could be like, okay, fine, but you need to get moving. You're already running late to go sell all the charcoal. So the family stays pleasant, Tanjiro stays likable and disciplined, but now there's a sliver of accountability for him in the mix. Because normally when the weather's decent, Tanjiro takes his younger siblings down the mountain with him on the cart. But today, because he's running late and it's already starting to snow now, that's not happening. It's too dangerous to bring the cart down the mountain and bring his siblings along. And if Tanjiro had left when he's actually supposed to that morning, several of his siblings could have gone with him into town, which means they would have been safely out of the house that night when the demon attacked, instead of at home and killed. So as Tanjiro is heading out, he runs into his younger sister Nezuko. In the original, this moment's pretty minor. She just says hi, tells him she'll see him later. It's really nothing more than establishing that these two oldest siblings get along. Here's where I'd have another change. When Tanjiro's passing Nezuko, she could stop him and be like, "Hey, are you okay?" Tanjiro would laugh it off and insist he's fine, like, "What do you mean?" But Nezuko wouldn't look convinced. In my version of the story, I'd like it so Nezuko has a strange knack for noticing things about other people. Noticing things before anybody else does. For example, she knows when one of her younger siblings is getting hungry before they complain about it, when their mother is pushing herself too hard, or when Tanjiro is carrying stress that he insists isn't there. Nezuko knows something's up with Tanjiro, that he's stressed out. He's still kicking himself for running late this morning. It was unlike him to lose track of time like that. He's the responsible sibling after all. So I would have Nezuko say to him, "I can come down with you if you want. I'll help you sell all that charcoal today. You probably shouldn't go down the mountain alone. Like, what if something happens? What if Tanjiro slips? Or he needs some help carrying things?" But Tanjiro would turn her down. Nicely, because he's still a good kid at heart, but firmly. He doesn't want help carrying the charcoal. He would think, "This is my mistake today. I should handle this." And that one small exchange could tell us something about Tanjiro. He doesn't let others help him with his problems because of that eldest sibling pressure he puts on himself. Now, I know the original story is super intentional about keeping Tanjiro blameless in his family's death. The snow is framed as pure bad luck, and actually it's his mom who insists that he go alone into town without his siblings. But hear me out. This tragedy is what fuels his entire mission for the rest of the series. Think about how much more powerful this emotional core could be for him if he was a little responsible for what happened. Because think about a character from a different story that's kind of similar to Tanjiro. Peter from Narnia. Peter's also the eldest sibling in his story. He's also lost his father, and he also stepped into that man of the house role. He's highly responsible, very protective of his younger siblings, but Peter's flaws come directly from that same burden. He's courageous, sure, but he's also stubborn, a little dismissive of his younger siblings' opinions, and he's actually got a bit of an authoritarian streak, especially with his younger brother Edmund in that first part of the story. And this ends up creating distance between them. I think there's something useful in that whole, "I'm the eldest brother, I have to carry my burdens alone" mentality he has. Because I think it will make his loss that's coming soon in this episode so much more tragic. But anyway, Tanjiro is walking into town by himself, coming down off the mountain. This is also where the original story introduces one of Tanjiro's strangest traits, his incredible sense of smell. Right away, it's clear this isn't just a kid with a good nose. Tanjiro has an almost superhuman sense of smell. The story makes Tanjiro's heightened sense of smell like a really distinct trait for him, but it never actually explains where it comes from. In my rewrite, I'd like to connect this ability, this great sense of smell he has, to something larger in the lore, but I'll explain that later. The next morning, Tanjiro heads back up the mountain, but as he climbs, his heightened sense of smell catches the scent of blood in the air. He rushes home and finds a horrifying scene waiting for him. Two of his siblings lie motionless in the snow outside, while inside the house he discovers the rest of his family dead. And I think this moment really does hit harder in my rewritten version of the story. Like I said before, he would realize that if he hadn't stayed late the previous day, practicing his father's fire-breathing dance, if he had just taken his siblings down to the village like usual, maybe things would have turned out differently. Because instead of just grieving what happened, he would be haunted by the belief that his own choices led to it. Tanjiro then discovers that Nezuko is the only one still alive. Exhausted and struggling through the snow, Tanjiro refuses to stop. Nezuko is the only family he has left, and he won't lose her too. And that desperation's even stronger here, because Tanjiro is blaming himself. Why didn't he just bring her to town when she asked to tag along with him? The survivor's guilt is hitting so hard here. Then suddenly Nezuko moves, she opens her eyes, revealing fangs, and begins violently thrashing on Tanjiro's back, sending them tumbling down the snowy mountainside. She rises from the snow and lunges at Tanjiro, who barely manages to stop her bite with a piece of wood wedged between her teeth. His sister has become a demon, but thanks to his heightened sense of smell, Tanjiro knows she wasn't the one that killed their family. Another demon came to their home that night and turned Nezuko into this. Tanjiro starts crying, begging his sister to hang in there, don't lose yourself. Then above him, Nezuko starts crying too. This is the original story's way of establishing early on that there's some part of Nezuko still in her, even right after her transformation. A demon slayer named Gyu suddenly arrives and attacks Nezuko. Tanjiro manages to shove her aside at the last second, causing Gyu's blade to miss its mark. Gyu demands to know why Tanjiro is protecting a demon. As a demon slayer, his duty is to kill her before she hurts anyone. Tanjiro refuses to accept this. He argues that Nezuko hasn't harmed anyone and that the demon who killed their family is still out there. He vows that somehow he'll find a way to make his sister human again. Because again, as far as Tanjiro is concerned, he's already failed the rest of his family. The thought of losing Nezuko too is unbearable. Tanjiro desperately throws a rock and charges at him with his hatchet, but Gyu knocks him aside. Then Gyu realizes something is wrong. Where did Tanjiro's hatchet go? Looking up, he barely avoids the weapon as it comes flying at him. Tanjiro had thrown his hatchet earlier, using the rock and his charge as distractions to buy the hatchet time to hit its target. For the first time, Gyu looks surprised and impressed. I think this is just a great scene in general to let that fire-breathing dance practice pay off. Because Tanjiro isn't a trained fighter, but it'd be cool if he has this natural intuitiveness to the way he moves. Like, I would have it so the audience recognizes the footwork that Tanjiro's doing from the dance that he was doing the other day. The footwork, the balance, the reflexes, they're all instinctively showing up in the fight between Gyu and him, kind of like the same principle as the Karate Kid. In The Karate Kid, Daniel spends the movie doing what seemed like random chores for Mr. Miyagi, only for it to turn out that those repetitive motions were secretly building muscle memory that he needs to fight. Tanjiro's fire dance training will give him an advantage of fighting long before he picks up a sword. Anyway, while Gyu's still processing what just happened, Nezuko breaks free of his grip. He expects her to attack Tanjiro, but instead she places herself between her brother and the demon slayer, growling defensively. And this is what shocks him. A starving demon should attack the nearest human without hesitation. Yet instead of harming her brother, she protects him. But here's another change I'd make. I think we should get an early hint that Nezuko is extremely tempted by human blood, including Tanjiro's blood. And resisting that urge takes so much effort on her part. Maybe as Tanjiro cuts himself during the struggle with Gyu, we could see Nezuko's eyes linger on that blood for a moment. She's tempted, and she could force herself to look away. So for now, she's resisting, but it is not pretty. She's drooling, ravenous, like really trying to avoid looking at her brother. When Tanjiro wakes up, he finds Nezuko beside him with a muzzle secured over her mouth. Gyu tells Tanjiro to travel to Mount Sagiri and seek out an old man there, and tell him Gyu sent them. Before leaving, he warns them never to let Nezuko be exposed to sunlight. So the two of them set off for Mount Sagiri, with Tanjiro building Nezuko a covered basket so he can carry her safely during the day. As night falls and she can travel on foot again, Tanjiro catches the smell of blood leading from a nearby temple. Inside the temple, there's a demon mid-feast, tearing through the temple residence, covered head to toe in blood. The demon lunges at Tanjiro, and Tanjiro manages to slice its throat open with his hatchet. Again, I'd like to incorporate the fire-breathing dance footwork, having Tanjiro use those movements to dodge and reposition himself against the demon, just to keep that plot point really consistent. And another change I'd like to make here is I want the demon to say something that hints at a larger concept I'm introducing into my rewrite. He would look at Tanjiro and go, "Are you one of those demon slayers?" And Tanjiro could be really confused, like, "I'm not a demon slayer, not yet. I'm not even that great of a fighter yet, so why would this demon think I am one?" And the demon could say, "You smell just like one," licking his lips. "You smell delicious." So there's something about Tanjiro's blood that is enticing to this demon. Remember that detail, because it's going to matter a lot in my rewrite. Tanjiro finds the demon's head trapped against a tree. Knowing he has to kill it, he raises his knife, but freezes. Despite everything the demon has done, he can't bring himself to take its life. This scene reminds me a lot of Frodo from Lord of the Rings when he's interacting with Gollum. If you've seen or read the trilogy, you know that Frodo is constantly defending Gollum because Frodo sees in him a version of himself, or more like a future version of himself. Here, I think Tanjiro's hesitation will work similarly. If demons are automatically beyond saving, then what does that mean for his sister? I feel like this would be a good explicit theme to kind of spell out in the show. Then a man wearing a Tengu mask suddenly appears behind Tanjiro. He coldly tells Tanjiro that the knife won't work. The masked man thinks that Tanjiro's compassion is a weakness. He can literally smell the kindness coming off of Tanjiro. I think it's worth noting, this old man who is revealed to be a former demon slayer who's going to end up training Tanjiro throughout season 1, he also happens to have an unusually sharp sense of smell as well. Coincidence? I think not, but more on that later. Just then, the sun rises, and the light burns the demon away, disintegrating before Tanjiro has to do anything. Tanjiro immediately searches for Nezuko, terrified that she suffered the same fate. Luckily, he finds her safe inside the nearby temple, hidden away in her covered basket where the sunlight can't reach her in the darkest corner of the room. But what if Nezuko wasn't just hiding from the light? Remember, there's dead bodies in this temple room, leftovers from the demon's feast earlier. So Nezuko could be white-knuckling it, fighting every desire she has to go over and eat some dead bodies. I really do feel like the show needs to have this hunger of hers be a constant looming threat, especially during this entire stretch of the story at the beginning. She should always be dangerously close to giving into it. And it should never feel fully resolved and could always potentially be a threat to Tanjiro. Meanwhile, outside, the old man's quietly burying the temple residents who didn't survive, treating their bodies with reverence. The old man introduces himself. His name is Urokodaki, the person Gyu sent Tanjiro to find. I think I want to build something into his character here. Yes, this old man is respectful towards the dead, but I want to hint that he is super haunted too. He would be deeply superstitious when it comes to death. Maybe he could be sprinkling something that's the equivalent of holy water over the graves, as if he's trying to keep the spirit of the dead humans from following him home. And Tanjiro could notice this man being very superstitious and wonder why. Because pretty early into season 1, we're going to learn that this old man carries a lot of responsibility for the deaths of some children in the past. And I want that guilt to shape his character a lot more visibly than it did in the original show. Kind of like the woodsman character from Over the Garden Wall. If anyone's seen it in that story, there's a woodsman character who lost his daughter in the woods and became convinced her soul got trapped inside a lantern. From that point on, he lives his entire life steeped in guilt, haunted by his failure to protect her, and endlessly tends the lantern as a form of penance. So for Urokodaki, you could have him put up little folklore charms all around his house in the mountain, salt lines across doorways, little rituals he repeats every single day. Now, Tanjiro doesn't understand any of it at first. Why does this man live in a constant, quiet state of dread? Another comparison that comes to mind for me is Jane Eyre. In Jane Eyre, the leading man, Mr. Rochester, acts the same way. He's always acting like something's wrong in his house, and it becomes obvious that Mr. Rochester is carrying around some terrible burden from his past he refuses to talk about. He's tense, distracted, always seeming to listen for something just out of sight. I'd love that feeling surrounding Urokodaki, a man so burdened by his past that he thinks the dead are watching him and following him at all times, and he's scared and definitely depressed. Urokodaki tells Tanjiro that he's about to test if he's fit to join the Demon Slayer Corps. Urokodaki takes off running, forcing Tanjiro to chase after him with Nezuko's basket on his back. By the time Tanjiro finally catches up, he's exhausted and barely able to breathe. Urokodaki tells him that was only the warm-up and that the real test is climbing the mountain. Okay, here's a bigger change from the original. In the show as written, Urokodaki simply tells Tanjiro he'll watch over Nezuko while Tanjiro is off doing his test. Urokodaki tucks her nicely into bed at his small house at the base of the mountain, and the two of them head up together that night. Then Urokodaki says, "Find your way back to my house by daybreak," and sends Tanjiro down the mountain alone to complete his first trial. Here's where my version of the story diverges. Instead of Urokodaki simply keeping Nezuko somewhere safe, I want something with much higher stakes. Before they head up, I want Urokodaki to tie up Nezuko outside of his house. Tanjiro tries to stop him, but he can't. This old man used to be one of the top-ranked demon slayers, and his reflexes and strength are so far beyond Tanjiro's. Tanjiro would be completely at his mercy. And now this first trial becomes something much darker. Urokodaki would tell Tanjiro that the test is simple. Make it down the mountain alone before sunrise. And if you don't make it in time, your sister's going to be burned alive in the sunlight. Tanjiro would be horrified. This man is insane, cruel. So now Tanjiro is sprinting back down the mountain, and the pressure is instantly way higher. Thankfully, Tanjiro's amazing nose comes in handy here, because as he's running, he's able to pick up on the traps scattered across the mountainside. When he finally makes it back down, it's moments from sunrise, moments from her being burned alive. But true to his word, Urokodaki would cut Nezuko down. He frees her just in time, right before the light can touch her. Nezuko would immediately rush to Tanjiro, relieved he made it back. And Tanjiro would be furious, understandably. But he's also completely wrecked, gasping, barely able to stand, let alone confront the old man. And he would collapse, same as in the original. But don't you think this change makes that first test so much more interesting to watch? Having Nezuko tied up like that to spur Tanjiro to be more desperate down the mountain? And I think it helps reinforce that demon slayers, retired or active, don't value any demon life, period. And Urokodaki is very much a tough love kind of trainer throughout the rest of the show, having fought demons his whole life. I would think that Urokodaki would assume Tanjiro is just very naive about this whole situation too. Like, who does this kid think he is dragging his demon sister along as if there's any chance to save her? And maybe some part of him could think, like, if I let his sister burn up in the sunlight and die, it's actually a mercy to this kid in disguise. It would force Tanjiro to let go of a fantasy that was never meant to be. Because Tanjiro just survived his first trial, Urokodaki agrees to take him on as a student. So Tanjiro would definitely be hesitant at first to accept Urokodaki on as a trainer, after what he just did to him and his sister. But he also could realize this is going to be a common reaction from demon slayers he comes across. Like, most of them are not going to accept or trust the demon that's traveling with him. So even though it bothers him, he would grit his teeth and accept the training. This next section of the story, which is Tanjiro's training arc under Urokodaki, is one of the biggest parts I want to rework in the rewrite of season 1. In the original story, Tanjiro spends months training at Urokodaki's home, learning everything he needs to become a demon slayer. Over time, Urokodaki is teaching Tanjiro the 10 forms of water breathing, the sword style that he specializes in. During his training, Tanjiro learns the only reliable ways to kill a demon are exposure to sunlight or decapitation with a special sword carried by every demon slayer. Tanjiro's training is all building towards a deadly trial called Final Selection. It's basically an entrance exam that aspiring demon slayers have to survive to officially join the Corps. Urokodaki is the one who decides when he's ready to attempt it. So the training continues for months, then years. However, during this entire stretch, Nezuko is just asleep. I kid you not, Nezuko sleeps in bed the entire time during his training. She doesn't wake up once for years during this. She doesn't need blood, flesh, food, nothing, which always felt very convenient to me. This had to have just been a way for the story to get her out of the way during this first part. It was like they didn't even know what to do with her. But it completely kills the urgency and momentum surrounding Nezuko's transformation into a demon. The show just having her sleep while she quote-unquote heals herself makes it seem like her becoming a demon wasn't even a big deal. So here's a big change I'd like to make. Nezuko definitely does not sleep the whole time. Sure, maybe in my version she could drift in and out of sleep in stretches for like a couple days at a time, but she's awake a lot more often. And she needs to eat in my version. Here's what I'm picturing. Urokodaki could tell Tanjiro flat out, you better keep your sister chained up unless you can watch her every single second. So Nezuko would end up chained in a shed near Urokodaki's house. This would be while Tanjiro is training up on the mountain during the day, because Urokodaki wants nothing to do with an unsupervised demon on his property. Like, he would treat her like she's a rabid dog. And so Nezuko would be chained up week after week, and she wouldn't be peacefully resting. She would be absolutely starving and getting more and more ravenous. So one night during Tanjiro's training, we could have it so Tanjiro lets Nezuko out of her shed with Urokodaki's permission, and the siblings could be walking together on the mountain for some fresh air for Nezuko. It could be part of their routine, like Tanjiro's checking up on her every night and feeling really bad that she has to be locked away like this. Then suddenly, because Nezuko's freed right now, she could see a deer, and she would lunge at it and tear into it out of desperation for some food. And seeing that, Tanjiro could think, maybe I could keep her fed this way with animals. So he could start hunting animals for her. And he'd be careful not to do it in front of Urokodaki, because he already knows the old man barely tolerates Nezuko as it is and would not approve of this. But Tanjiro doesn't really see another option. She needs something in her system right now. I would think that Tanjiro would already know how to set traps and hunt from being raised in the wilderness with his family, so him being able to bring Nezuko squirrels, deer, whatever he can manage every couple of days feels realistic to me. It's basically the same struggle Louis goes through in Interview with the Vampire. Louis tries to survive on rats instead of humans, but even Louis struggles with that animal-only diet. It leaves him drained, uncomfortable, and out of it at times, because it's just not the nutrition his body actually needs. So yeah, Nezuko would be the same way. Tanjiro means well, but animal blood and animal flesh will not be enough for Nezuko. And she could be emotionally unraveling, constantly on edge. How much longer can this diet of hers actually last? And Tanjiro could hate watching her like this. And of course, Urokodaki would quickly find out what Tanjiro's up to, that he's been feeding her animals on the down low. And he could be the one that reveals to Tanjiro, this diet is not going to be sustainable for her long term. So day by day, during this training arc, Nezuko is getting more and more agitated in the shed. But Tanjiro has barely any time to figure out a solution to this, because he's already pushing himself to total exhaustion in training during the day. And on top of that, he's already walking on thin ice with Urokodaki, trying to convince him that this whole arrangement isn't a disaster waiting to happen. Meanwhile, as Tanjiro continues training, he learns the fundamentals of swordsmanship. But here's the thing, between Urokodaki's brutal training, taking care of Nezuko, and trying to manage her increasingly unpredictable behavior, including helping her find animals to satiate her hunger, Tanjiro hasn't actually practiced his fire-breathing dance in months. The ritual his father was so adamant he maintained has slowly fallen out of his routine. And that could come back to bite him during training, because now Tanjiro is making mistakes he normally wouldn't. Maybe he would hesitate or slip up on one of Urokodaki's traps, because he's forgotten parts of the footwork tied to the dance that make him so nimble. Maybe today, Urokodaki throws something new into the mix, like a hidden pressure plate buried under leaves, and it could launch a blade at ankle height, so he could slip or get cut by this blade, something to get his ankle bleeding. But down at the base of the mountain, in the shed that Nezuko's chained up in every day, her hunger finally overwhelms her. She loses all sense of herself and is consumed by bloodlust. And down at the shed, this faint trace of Tanjiro's blood would be wafting in the air and send Nezuko into a complete frenzy. She would snap off her chains with her strength and tear out of the shed, sprinting up the mountain at a speed that should not be possible. Thankfully, Urokodaki would not be anywhere nearby at that moment, because he always leaves when Tanjiro is practicing his drills, and Tanjiro would be caught very off guard when his sister appears, but she doesn't attack him. She'd be staring at the blood dripping from his ankle into the dirt. And Tanjiro could be definitely scared during this moment, but then he'd see how much she's suffering, because he knows how starving his sister has been. And he makes a really hard call, and he lets her have a small amount of his blood. Just a little, because he can't stand watching her being tortured from starvation any longer. And almost instantly she calms down after a few drops of his blood, fully satisfied from a very small amount. And Tanjiro is relieved that it worked. But then the dread sets in. What does this mean going forward for them? It means that for the rest of this mountain training arc, every couple of weeks, which ends up being the rhythm Nezuko's body needs to feed, Tanjiro would give her a small cut of his own blood. Not enough to seriously weaken him for training the next day, because he's pushing himself so hard during the day, but enough to satisfy her. And this would become their secret routine while living under Urokodaki's roof. And remember, Urokodaki's got a really sharp nose, just like Tanjiro. So he would time Nezuko's feedings during their nighttime walk. Like he'd lead her into the woods where there's really strong smelling plants nearby, or some type of wildlife that would help mask the smell of his blood, just enough to keep it hidden from his trainer. Now, you might think that I'm totally undermining Tanjiro's character with this, because in the original, his whole identity is built around honesty, integrity, but here's how I see it. Tanjiro can tell that Nezuko has way more self-control than a demon should reasonably have. I'm just making her not perfectly clean, because her original self never needed any human flesh or blood ever. And in my version, she needs a little bit of his blood. But she still hasn't attacked Tanjiro, and still shows a level of restraint that totally baffles him. She just needs a small hit occasionally to survive. And for whatever reason, his blood can sustain her for weeks at a time, which doesn't feel like an unmanageable cost for him. And he sees real potential in his sister. The idea that she could keep improving, needing less and less of his blood over time, as he keeps searching for a cure for her. It's a means to an end, a small lie worth his sister's life, because he chooses not to tell Urokodaki. If the old man ever gets suspicious, Tanjiro just tells him that he's been feeding her animals like usual. I think that this change I've made makes Tanjiro a liar in the same way Professor Lupin is in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Nobody considers Professor Lupin a villain for hiding his werewolf status to keep his teaching job at Hogwarts. I mean, he still turns out to be one of the most loyal, dependable people in Harry's life. In that world, werewolves are discriminated against. And there's some legitimate reasoning behind it, because werewolves are dangerous when they transform. But that fear leaves zero room for nuance, sympathy, or trust in someone who didn't choose to be a werewolf. Professor Lupin's doing everything he can to still be a decent person, even with his secret. So in my version, Tanjiro's not lying out of selfishness or wanting to deceive others. He's trying to give his sister the best possible shot at survival. She just needs more time. And also because I'm having Nezuko calm down instantly after receiving some of Tanjiro's blood. She's barely a risk at all afterwards. She stays peaceful, settled, resting super easy for at least 2 weeks before needing more blood. And Urokodaki can notice this shift. And he could raise an eyebrow and say to Tanjiro, she seems a lot calmer lately. Like, did you change her diet? And Tanjiro would insist, like, no, see, I told you. She's getting better at controlling herself every single day. Can't you give her more of a chance now? And Urokodaki could think about it, because he'd be a little impressed with how tranquil she's become. Maybe it's worth keeping Nezuko's animal diet in the mix here, like as cover to help mask the smell of Tanjiro's blood. It could give Urokodaki a plausible explanation for why Nezuko seems fine, because he's never actually encountered a demon sustaining itself only on animals before. So Urokodaki doesn't have a frame of reference for how that would work, which would give the siblings a believable cover. I would change how Nezuko is treated during this part of the story by Urokodaki. Since she's so much calmer thanks to Tanjiro's blood, Urokodaki would slowly begin to trust her more, because it would be months without any incidents from her, and Urokodaki could start giving her more freedom, eventually allowing her inside his home instead of keeping her out in the shed chained up. And Urokodaki would become fascinated by her self-control. A demon who could resist harming humans shouldn't be possible. And Nezuko could watch him cook during the day, watch him do his chores, maybe even assist him hanging up his little talisman and folklore charms, the ones that he thinks protects him from ghosts. And it would make Urokodaki question everything he knew about demons. After a year of training, Urokodaki tells Tanjiro that he has taught him everything he can. He leads Tanjiro to a massive boulder in the forest and gives him one final challenge: cut it in half. What Tanjiro doesn't know is that this task is meant to be nearly impossible. Urokodaki isn't trying to prepare him for final selection, he's setting him up for failure. Urokodaki is trying to prevent him from going at all, having already watched too many young Demon Slayer candidates die during final selection. So just like the original story, Tanjiro is spending months repeatedly trying to cut this boulder, and he would still be secretly feeding Nezuko every couple of weeks without Urokodaki catching on. Eventually, though, Tanjiro does grow frustrated, and he's ready to give up. That's when he notices a mysterious masked boy, someone with no scent at all. The boy challenges Tanjiro with a wooden sword, and tells Tanjiro that he hasn't mastered even one water-breathing form, and knocks him unconscious. Tanjiro wakes up that night to find a mysterious girl there too. She introduces herself as Makomo and offers to help him improve. She explains that the boy who defeated him is Sabito. We eventually learn these two are the ghosts of former students of Urokodaki's, pupils who didn't survive final selection. They're the spirits that are haunting Urokodaki, the reason why he stopped training students for so long. Which of course in the original made it so him training Tanjiro is a really big deal, but it also makes Tanjiro's hidden secret in my version hit even harder, given how much time and effort and hope Urokodaki's pouring into Tanjiro. And by the way, Urokodaki doesn't know that the ghosts have appeared to Tanjiro, let alone are helping him with his training. Makomo begins teaching Tanjiro total concentration breathing, a technique that allows demon slayers to push their bodies beyond normal human limits. So Tanjiro throws himself into training. Around this stretch, I think it'd be a nice detail to have Tanjiro drifting more and more away from his fire-breathing dance training, without even realizing it. Like his dance movements are slowly getting replaced by water-breathing techniques, which is technically a very different way of moving and fighting, which is of course very effective on its own, but we do know he'll be a really powerful fighter if he's able to incorporate his fire-breathing dance technique into the swordsmanship too. Anyway, Tanjiro challenges Sabito again. He faces him in front of the boulder. Tanjiro lands the first strike, slicing through Sabito's mask. Then Tanjiro realizes he didn't just cut Sabito's mask, he cut the boulder itself. After the training and guidance from the two ghost children, Tanjiro has mastered total concentration breathing, and developed an incredible ability to sense maneuvers in battle through his heightened sense of smell. Makomo congratulates Tanjiro before fading away, leaving him with one final message: defeat the demon waiting at final selection. When Urokodaki sees the split boulder, he finally accepts that Tanjiro is ready. He tells Tanjiro he's proud of him. But I'd love for this moment to make it clear that Urokodaki's not just proud, he is terrified. He doesn't want more blood on his hands. He does not want another student to die because of him. He does not want another ghost to follow him forever. But he knows that Tanjiro is not becoming a demon slayer for his ego or his pride. He's doing this for his sister, for something selfless. And that's why Urokodaki's able to let him go, because deep down he does want Tanjiro to succeed. And underneath all of this, Urokodaki's been softening towards Nezuko this whole time too. She's been out of her chains, coexisting with him for so long in his house. He wants these siblings to achieve their goal. Urokodaki tells him, make sure you come back alive from final selection. Your sister and I will be waiting for you. Which would make Tanjiro stop in my version. And he could say, wait a minute, how far is final selection from here? Like, how long am I going to be gone for this? And Urokodaki could say, well, the trial itself lasts a week, plus a few days of travel on foot each way. So maybe about 2 weeks total, possibly more. And internally, Tanjiro is spiraling about this, because he's been feeding Nezuko a little bit of his blood like every 2 weeks. Can she hold herself together that long without him? Because if she goes long enough without fresh blood, she might slip back into a feral, bloodthirsty state. But he also can't skip final selection. So he could ask Urokodaki, like, what if I just bring Nezuko along? Can she just wait nearby while I complete the trial? And Urokodaki could get, like, immediately suspicious and be like, why would you do that? And Tanjiro realizes fast that he can't push this. He's gonna look too sus. He cannot risk Urokodaki finding out that Nezuko's been feeding on him. So Tanjiro just tells himself, okay, I'm gonna get through final selection as fast as I can. But then a darker thought would creep in. What if Tanjiro doesn't survive final selection? And then Urokodaki will be blindsided by a starving, feral Nezuko. And wait, Urokodaki's not just some normal, ordinary guy. He's an elite, battle-hardened demon slayer. So if Nezuko starts showing any signs of losing control, he's not going to hesitate to kill her, which means if Tanjiro doesn't make it back, his life is not the only one on the line. Meanwhile, Urokodaki gives Tanjiro another piece of information. The more humans a demon's consume, the more powerful the demon becomes. And once Tanjiro's great sense of smell is developed enough, he'll be able to tell how many people demons kill just by their scent. And in the back of Tanjiro's mind, he could be like, thank goodness I've only ever given Nezuko a few drops of my blood, spaced so many weeks apart. Because as far as he can tell, Urokodaki's not picked up on this. I also think it would be a nice subtle detail if these feedings that Tanjiro's giving Nezuko, those steady doses of human blood over time, are quietly making Nezuko a little bit stronger. Just like a little edge that even Tanjiro doesn't notice yet. Not until they're up against real threats later in the story. The next morning, Tanjiro's getting ready to leave, and he stops to check on Nezuko, who's asleep in one of the rooms in Urokodaki's house. And Tanjiro could look at her and think, I have to get back here in time. I can't let Urokodaki's trust in me and her go to waste. You could even insert Tanjiro and Nezuko having a little conversation before he leaves, like a secret discussion, where Tanjiro could say, if I'm not back in time, you have to tie yourself up so you don't attack Urokodaki, or you have to leave this mountain if I'm not back in 2 weeks. Anything to prevent her from getting killed by Urokodaki. Like, doesn't this whole stretch just build so much more tension in my version? Because the problem with the original Demon Slayer is there was no stakes in the beginning of the story. There was barely any sense of urgency pushing Tanjiro forward. Like, oh good, Nezuko's sleeping for 2 years straight. I can train without any problems right now. And guess what? She doesn't need any human flesh to survive, so all the problems of being a demon immediately have gone away. Like, it's all too perfect and neat and easy. I just feel like my changes have fixed that. So Tanjiro heads out with a sword, like in the original, and of course he's very worried about getting back in time, but he's still hopeful. He's determined to get through final selection. Through the rest of this part of season 1, we follow the same core plot, but now there's this constant undercurrent in Tanjiro's head, this pressure to move fast and get back to Nezuko before time runs out. Night falls and Tanjiro arrives at final selection where he learns the rules. Survive 7 days on a mountain filled with captured demons. Tanjiro enters the mountain. A terrified contestant is being chased by a massive, mutated demon that has grown powerful by consuming other applicants. The demon realizes Tanjiro is Urokodaki's student and reveals it has been trapped on this mountain for decades thanks to being captured by Urokodaki when he was still a demon slayer. During that time, it's killed 13 of Urokodaki's students, including the ghost kids who trained Tanjiro. Now is bloodthirsty to destroy Tanjiro as its next target. Enraged, Tanjiro attacks and finds an opening in its neck and lands a clean strike. Rather than celebrating the victory, Tanjiro mourns the person the demon once was, sensing the demon's lingering grief in its final moments. This is also when Tanjiro sees a vision of the spirits of Urokodaki's fallen students gathered by the split boulder. He tells them they can finally rest, and they disappear together into the afterlife. I don't want that moment here, though. You'll see why in a second. Okay, back to the original story. Tanjiro continues fighting through final selection, facing demon after demon in the pouring rain. Eventually, he makes it through the last night of final selection. Out of more than 20 candidates, only a handful remain. The final selection officials return and explain the basics of the Demon Slayer Corps, the ranking system, the sword process, and the messenger crows assigned to each new member. In the original version, this is a major moment. But I've rewritten it, so Tanjiro barely has any time to even care about this stuff. His priority is getting back to Nezuko. As he limps back, injured and exhausted, he collapses at one point. Every part of him is aching. How many days has it been? He's been gone for 2 weeks from Nezuko at this point. Like, what if she's already slipped into starvation? What if she's already feral? But his body's completely wrecked from final selection. Tanjiro forces himself back up anyway, pushing through the pain, limping as fast as his legs will carry him. Night falls by the time he finally reaches Urokodaki's house. Tanjiro's in bad shape, silently praying that a horrible scene is not waiting for him. Then the door kicks open. Nezuko steps out into the night, looks up at him and sees him. She pulls him into a tight hug. Tanjiro breaks down in her arms, overwhelmed with the relief that she's still herself, and already quietly planning to get her fed the moment they're alone. He can learn that she spent the last couple of weeks sleeping in waves, deliberately conserving enough energy so she wouldn't get ravenous while he was gone, so she was able to stretch past her 2-week limit. This is already an element in the original story, but I don't want it to be for like 2 years. I want it to just be for like a couple weeks at a time max. Also in the original version, sleeping is a permanent fix for Nezuko's hunger, and that's not the case in my version. It just buys her a little bit more time before her next meal. Urokodaki watches the two of them, then pulls them both into a group hug. Stunned and relieved, Tanjiro made it back alive, and completely unaware of the precarious situation Tanjiro left him in. So same as the original, that night, Tanjiro tells Urokodaki everything that happened during final selection, and how he destroyed the demon responsible for killing Urokodaki's previous students. I'm having it so Tanjiro asks Urokodaki to walk out to the split boulder, and once they arrive, they would both put their hands on it. And this is when the fallen students would appear, smiling at both student and master. Urokodaki could be overwhelmed with emotion and cry tears of joy and sadness, and they would watch the dead kids all walk away into the next life. I want it placed right here, instead of just randomly during final selection earlier like the original story did, because of what this means for Urokodaki. I think it's just more powerful if what's actually binding them to the mountain isn't the demon that killed them in final selection like in the original. It's instead Urokodaki's own guilt. His belief that their deaths were his fault, his guilt finally easing, is what lets them go. And it could deepen his trust in Tanjiro even further, setting up the moment later where Urokodaki vouches for him to the higher-ups of the Demon Slayer Corps. That night, Urokodaki explains that some demons possess demon blood arts, unique supernatural abilities that make them especially dangerous. Soon after, Tanjiro's crow arrives with his first official mission: travel to a town where young girls have been disappearing every night and find the demon responsible. He starts getting ready, and this time there's a noticeable difference in how calm he feels compared to Final Selection, because this time Nezuko's coming with him. Away from Urokodaki's constant watchfulness and his great nose, now secretly feeding Nezuko is going to be a lot easier. Before Tanjiro leaves, Urokodaki gives him a specially designed box to carry Nezuko safely during the day. Urokodaki adjusts his collar and gives him a reassuring pat on the shoulder, a fatherly gesture to show how much Tanjiro has come to mean to him. And in that moment, Tanjiro could feel guilty. Guilt over everything he's been hiding this whole time from him. He does not want to let this man down. He tells himself that if he can keep helping Nezuko hold on to her humanity, keep pushing towards a cure, then maybe all these lies will have been worth it in the end. Maybe he can still make Urokodaki proud, because he really does owe it to him. Now Tanjiro is walking toward the village, checking in on Nezuko in her box. "You doing okay in there?" No answer, so he figures she's asleep. Tanjiro is a little overprotective of Nezuko, hyper-focused on keeping her out of harm's way, because this is his first official mission as a demon slayer. When Tanjiro arrives in the village, he begins investigating the disappearances. He finds a grieving young man whose fiancée vanished the night before and follows him to the spot where she was last seen. At that moment, another girl in the village is attacked in her own home. Tanjiro arrives too late to prevent the demon's attack, but manages to pull the missing girl from the shadowy void before she disappears. Then he sees a demon rising up from the earth, using some kind of blood demon art. And the demon attacks again, this time creating multiple copies of itself. One of the demon copies could comment on Tanjiro, saying, "What a delicious smelling demon slayer we have here," remarking on the smell of his blood. By this point, several demons will have made similar comments to Tanjiro, all fixating on his scent. But why? For now, it's just another mystery I'm having hang over season 1. As the battle continues, Nezuko kicks free from her box on Tanjiro's back and sends the demon's head spinning in one hit. Tanjiro will be shocked. His sister has joined the fight. I've always loved this moment. Nezuko stepping in as a fighting partner with this natural instinct for combat against other demons. But I'd love for Tanjiro to feel much more conflicted about this than the original. Over the course of season 1, he's going to realize that he actually fights better with her at his side. But right now, he's not emotionally ready to accept that. Because Tanjiro hates the idea of putting her in danger, and it could be a real ongoing tension for him. He's been working for years now to preserve her humanity. And if she's fighting and killing demons, especially on his behalf, she's moving away from that. He doesn't want his sister to have to kill humans or demons. Because Tanjiro's fighting for her soul. He wants to preserve his younger sister's innocence. So he would feel so conflicted because she's a very powerful asset in battle. And here's a part of the original I am not a fan of. Nezuko looks at the humans nearby her, and she sees them as if they were her own dead siblings. Because of that, she doesn't attack them. We learned that while she was asleep, Urokodaki actually used a form of hypnotic suggestion on her, making her see all humans as her family now, that she should protect humanity because of this, and that demons are her enemy. It's so lame. The idea that Nezuko needs to be programmed not to attack humans, instead of it just being a testament to her willpower, it just undercuts her as a character. So in my version, we are cutting the hypnosis completely. Instead, I'm having the human bystander trip and skid his knee. Maybe he's trying to run away with the unconscious girl in his arms. She'll be staring at this human's fresh blood coming from his knee. And Nezuko manages to hold herself back from attacking him purely through sheer force of will. There's no hypnosis here. Think of Jasper in New Moon. Sure, it's a meme at this point. He looks crazy, Bella gets thrown into a table and glass shatters everywhere. But honestly, I always thought that scene really worked. It's highly entertaining, and I really like the idea of having vampires being a real standing threat to the humans around them at all times. Like, that would be so compelling with Nezuko. And the hypnosis takes away any of that excitement. So even though she's successfully restraining herself here, she's still so agitated. Has this simmering hunger and rage she has to suppress at all times. And it needs somewhere to go, which works out perfectly because right now she can channel every bit of rage and starvation and frustration she has straight at the demon her brother is fighting. When the demon manages to injure her, Tanjiro returns just in time to protect her. Tanjiro demands answers about the Demon King. Muzan is the first demon who's existed for 1,000 years. He is the source of all demons, the one responsible for attacking Tanjiro's family, which means he's probably the only one who knows how to turn Nezuko back into a human. But the demon refuses to speak out of fear. We learn that the Demon King has threatened his followers into silence, and it becomes clear just how terrified demons are of their own creator. When the demon lunges at him, Tanjiro kills it, and once again, he's left with no answers about the Demon King. Tanjiro turns and finds Nezuko slumped against a wall. Her body's already trying to heal the gash on her head. In my version, this sight immediately fills him with guilt. He blames himself for letting her get hurt, taking the responsibility on his shoulders like he always does. It also would make sense here for him to let her feed on one of his battle wounds, just enough blood to calm her down and give her some strength to heal, because she's completely exhausted from the fight, and Tanjiro would want to help her however he can. His crow soon arrives with his next assignment: travel to Tokyo where another demon is hiding. As he walks through the crowded streets with Nezuko beside him, he has culture shock. This is easily the most populated place these siblings have been to, and for Nezuko, it should be super overwhelming. Like, Tanjiro could keep checking in with her as they're walking side by side, and she ate recently, so she should be okay, but we could learn that this temptation is still real when she's in such close proximity with so many humans. Like, they're all packed in close, veins pulsing at their necks, and her instincts are picking up on all of it, which is why Tanjiro figures she'd be better off on the quieter side streets, away from the thick of the crowds, leading them to a little udon cart from the original story. He orders some food, but while eating, a familiar scent suddenly hits him, the same one from his family's home after the attack. Without thinking, Tanjiro runs after it, leaving Nezuko behind as he follows the scent of the Demon King. He finds a man with unmistakably demonic eyes, calmly walking through the city with a human wife and young daughter. Tanjiro is shocked to learn Muzan has been living among humans, hiding in plain sight as a normal family man. Then he notices Muzan's claws as he scratches a passerby's neck. The injured man immediately transforms into a demon and begins attacking the woman next to him. Tanjiro rushes in to stop him, but realizes too late that it was a distraction. Muzan calmly slips away with his family. The attack and his screaming draws the police, and they assume he's drunk and causing a scene. Tanjiro tries to explain, "No, don't pull me away, that's a demon," but the police don't listen to him and assume he's crazy. It seems like there's a disconnect. In the villages, a lot of people seem to know about the demonic threat, but in the city, it's not known or it's dismissed, like the police did just now. That disconnect is something I wish the series explored more, because something I kept thinking when I was watching season 1 for the first time is I really wish the human police and government played a bigger role in the Demon Slayer world, the overall conflict of the story. Because we know the Demon Slayer Corps operates outside of official government recognition. So why does the government seem oblivious to a war that's apparently been going on between humans and demons for centuries now? Like, maybe the Demon King has some kind of influence in the human government itself. After having lived this long disguised as a human, he's had centuries to build wealth, make connections, carve out a whole fabricated identity. What if he was subtly influencing human politicians? He could be fueling the denial that demons exist, or somehow steering the government away from ever officially recognizing the Demon Slayer Corps. Because he has every incentive to keep the Demon Slayer Corps isolated, without any government support. Because he wants humans to not know that the Demon Slayer Corps exists, so their ranks won't grow. Like, wouldn't this add some nice texture to this world? Back to the original plot, though. As Tanjiro is dealing with the police, a demon woman steps forward and she reveals herself as Lady Tamayo. She is a doctor who wants to help him destroy Muzan. They share the same goal. Meanwhile, Muzan summons 2 of his followers and gives them a new order. Find the Demon Slayer wearing the Hanafuda earrings and bring me his head. The earrings immediately attracted Muzan's attention because they belonged to a swordsman from his past. Meanwhile, I want Tanjiro to race back to the udon stand in a panic. He realized he abandoned Nezuko, so he's running back and prays that she hasn't messed with any humans while he was gone. And yet again, she's pretty calm when Tanjiro gets back. But I'd love it if she was kind of eyeing the guy running the udon cart nearby. I'm telling you, having a demon character restraining herself at every turn would just be so fun to watch. Way more interesting than some hypnotized demon that's just convinced all human beings are her family. The demon assistant who was with Lady Tamayo earlier is waiting for them. His name is Yushiro, and he's here to bring them to her. In the original show, Nezuko doesn't attack Lady Tamayo and Yushiro because of the hypnosis Urokodaki placed on her. For some reason, this hypnosis ends up applying to Lady Tamayo and Yushiro here too, despite them being demons. I guess because they're being friendly or peaceful with her. Like I've said before, I'm just cutting this whole idea in my version. No hypnosis. It's not going to be some magical influence that tells Nezuko who to treat as family or not. If she decides to protect someone, it's because she's made that choice herself. But anyway, I'd have Tanjiro not waste any time when he gets there. He'd immediately ask Lady Tamayo how to turn a demon back into a human. For every wound, Lady Tamayo tells him, there's some kind of treatment, and I believe a treatment could exist, and I intend to find it. She explains she needs to study demon blood extensively, and ideally more samples from demons closely tied to the Demon King himself. Tanjiro agrees to help try to gather samples. As Lady Tamayo is talking, Tanjiro subtly gives her a sniff, because thanks to his heightened sense of smell, he knows that Lady Tamayo is trustworthy in telling him the truth. Lady Tamayo would notice this, and says, I can see why you became a demon slayer. You're Marechi. And then she looks over at Nezuko too, and she would say, it seems like your sister was Marechi as a human as well. And then Tanjiro would stare at her like, huh? Lady Tamayo would explain that Marechi is an extremely rare and highly sought after blood type. It's also why the 2 of you siblings have such unusually heightened senses. She explains that Tanjiro's incredible sense of smell isn't just a random gift. Tanjiro will be like, wait, what? I didn't even know I was Marechi. Whatever that is. My sister doesn't have any heightened senses like me. I'm the one with a good sense of smell. Lady Tamayo could be like, oh really? I'm surprised you haven't noticed. I believe your sister has a heightened sense of interoception. Now Tanjiro is even more confused. Now, if you've seen the original story, you're probably thinking right now, hold on. Tanjiro and Nezuko are not Marechi. Marechi has nothing to do with heightened senses. And since when does Nezuko have a heightened sense of interoception, whatever that is? And yes, you are absolutely right. This is a huge change in my rewritten version of season 1. In the original story, the Marechi concept isn't introduced until later in season 1, and it has no connection to Tanjiro or Nezuko or heightened senses. But in my rewrite, I want to introduce this concept much earlier, and I want to tie it directly into the siblings' backstory. Right now, it probably sounds like I'm connecting a bunch of random ideas together. I promise I'm not. There's a reason why these changes exist, and they'll pay off later. Stick with me here. Unfortunately, though, before Lady Tamayo can explain further, 2 demons serving the Demon King have tracked them down, and one of their weapons comes crashing through the building. I feel like this fight scene really undersold Lady Tamayo and Yushiro. They were just standing back watching Tanjiro fight, so I'd love for there to be at 1 or 2 points in this fight, them actively using their bodies as shields for Tanjiro, because neither of them can die the way a human would. Outside, Tanjiro finally figures out how to counter the eyeball demon's attacks and manages to defeat him. However, the battle leaves him completely exhausted and badly injured. Nezuko takes over the fight, protecting everyone by repeatedly kicking away the ball demon's attacks. Lady Tamayo later explains that neither demon was actually part of the 12 Kizuki, demons who serve Muzan directly. Even so, she collects their blood samples in hopes they can still create a cure for demonism. Before they leave, though, I'd love for Lady Tamayo to say something else to Tanjiro. She could say, "I'm surprised the Demon Slayer Corps have allowed you to keep your demon sister alive." And Tanjiro could freeze. Lady Tamayo would notice that he hesitated. She'd say, "Don't tell me they don't know." And Tanjiro would be like, "Oh, I mean, I think they know." But even as he says it, Tanjiro is starting to worry. So far, the only Demon Slayer people that know about Nezuko are Gyu and Urokodaki. He has no idea what the rest of the Corps, especially the higher-ups, would think. Lady Tamayo would get very serious now. She could say, "Please be very careful when the time comes to tell them." Let's just say they tend to have very strict views when it comes to demonkind. So Tanjiro is back on the road, with Nezuko riding along in her box on his back. His crow swoops in, telling him to head where his next mission is. At some point along the way, they could pause, and Nezuko would take a small drink of his blood. This has become the routine now before every mission, just in case. Then Tanjiro spots a familiar face on his path, Zenitsu, a fellow demon slayer he recognizes from Final Selection, who is on his knees begging a random girl to marry him. While he'll eventually become one of Tanjiro's closest friends, right now Zenitsu is an anxious, desperate, and girl-crazy boy who's convinced he's going to die as a demon slayer and wants to avoid dying alone. I'd also like to change Zenitsu's backstory. In the original, his backstory is that he fell for a woman who tricked him into taking on a massive debt. An older man, who happened to be a former demon slayer, paid it off for him, but forced Zenitsu to train under him to repay what he owed. Despite being terrified the entire time, Zenitsu survived the training in the final selection. He's shocked he's still alive, and convinced that a demon will kill him in the most horrible way possible. I'd like for my version to keep Zenitsu's anxious personality, but I'd like to change why he's so anxious. What if Zenitsu's fear came from a lifetime of being hunted by demons? Like, demons kept gravitating towards him his entire life, and he never knew why. And every demon that's ever been drawn to him has said the same thing. His blood smells incredible. In my version, that's why Zenitsu became a demon slayer in the first place. It wasn't to repay a debt, it was because learning to fight was his only shot at surviving. Wouldn't this make his constant anxiety feel much more understandable? Like he spent his entire life living in survival mode. Tanjiro, on the other hand, wouldn't have any frame of reference for this. He grew up isolated on a mountain with his family, away from other humans and demons, right up until the day his family was slaughtered. But now that he's joined the Corps, the demons he's run into have all clocked something about him. Remember the demon at the monastery? When I had him say to Tanjiro that he smelled like a demon slayer and looked unusually eager to eat him? It was the first hint that certain humans possess a special type of blood very enticing to demons. And remember, I had Lady Tamayo mention that Tanjiro is a Marechi, so I think it opens up a question for my version of Season 1. Is Zenitsu Marechi too? Like, that would be a weird coincidence, Tanjiro would think. Why do both of these boys have unique blood? As Tanjiro turns it over in his mind, a crow interrupts with their next mission. They head through the woods until they discover a massive house hidden among the trees. Tanjiro and Zenitsu find 2 terrified children who explain that a monster dragged their older brother inside. Tanjiro confronts the house's main demon. As Tanjiro prepares to fight, he overhears the demon mention a Marechi child he's been searching for. I'd have the demon actually stop and look at Tanjiro, and he could say, "Wait a minute, how many Marechi are in my house?" And Tanjiro would pause, like, there's that word Marechi again. Why does everyone keep talking about that? But there's no time to think about it now, because the demon strikes his drum, causing the entire room to shift sideways. The mansion itself is under this demon's control, allowing him to rearrange the space however he wants. Suddenly, the shirtless man wearing a boar's head, Inosuke, crashes through the wall, charging at the demon. The demon strikes the drum again, flipping the room upside down. The demon is super irritated by all these intruders, but I'm adding in a bit of excitement for him too, given what he just said about multiple Marechi under one roof. Consuming 1 Marechi, he says, is worth 100 ordinary humans in 1 meal. Tanjiro follows a faint trace of blood to find the Marechi boy hiding nearby, clutching one of the demon's drums. The brother explains how he's still alive. 2 of the demons in the house had started fighting over who would get to eat him first, and during the chaos, one of the demon's drums was cut off. The boy grabbed it and used its power to teleport himself between rooms, staying hidden and out of the demon's reach ever since. So here is a big change I'm making my version. This kid, who is Marechi, has his own heightened sense, just like Tanjiro. But instead of smelling really well, this kid's heightened sense is called chronoception. Chronoception is just being able to sense time is passing. When this kid intensely focuses, the world around him could seem to slow down. It explains how this ordinary kid was able to react so quickly and escape the demons earlier. In the original story, Tanjiro's crow shows up around this point and explains what Marechi is. Marechi is an extremely rare type of blood that demons find incredibly valuable. Like mentioned before, to a demon, 1 Marechi person is worth dozens of ordinary humans, which is why they become so obsessed with hunting them. But then the crow could say something else in my version. It would say, "You keep hearing the word Marechi for a reason, Tanjiro." Every demon slayer in this house, Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Zenitsu, share something in common with that boy, Marechi blood. I'd like to introduce that a surprisingly large number of demon slayers are Marechi. It makes a lot of sense to me personally, because if your blood naturally attracts demons, you're much more likely to encounter one at some point in your life. Think of Zenitsu in his backstory that I added earlier. He's been a magnet for demons throughout all of his childhood. And if you survive those early encounters with demons, there's a good chance you're going to eventually join the Demon Slayer Corps, because you're going to have to learn how to defend yourself. And the crow could also explain that Marechi is hereditary. And legend says that it first began appearing around the same time as when the Demon King showed up, though nobody knows exactly why. It would be an ancient bloodline passed from generation to generation. It gives the people who carry it a heightened sense. Which sense they develop varies from person to person, or sometimes it runs through certain family lines. So Tanjiro's heightened sense of smell, Urkodaki's is smell too, and Zenitsu's is hearing. We learned that Inosuke has a heightened sense of touch. And while we're on that topic, most people think that humans only have 5 senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. That's not actually true though. Humans have way more senses than that. Here's a Theo Von clip that explains what I mean.
I bet there's 30 senses. We just don't even know some of what they are yet.
There's up to 33.
Is there really?
I went to...
Dude. They told us there's 5. Did they tell you that, dude?
Well, not at medical school. At medical school, I obviously knew there's more than 5, but I didn't know there's 22 to 33.
So 2 of the senses alluded to here are chronoception, like the boy who grabbed the drum, and interoception. And that's when something Lady Tamayo said earlier could suddenly click for Tanjiro. She told him that Nezuko must have been Marechi when she was a human, and that her heightened sense was interoception, which is an awareness of your body's internal state. And thinking back, it actually fits. Growing up, Nezuko always seemed unusually in tune with people. Like I said in the first part of the video, she could always tell when their mother was overworking herself, when Tanjiro was stressed or exhausted, but he didn't admit it. She would be aware of when her own emotions were starting to overwhelm her. And if Marechi heightened senses could carry over after becoming a demon, then Nezuko didn't lose this heightened ability when she transformed. It just evolved. That heightened awareness may be part of what's allowing Nezuko to manage her hunger so well. She instinctively knows when her body is reaching its limits and sleeps through the worst of it instead of constantly giving in to her cravings, because she could sense that her bloodlust was building long before it takes over her, which is why she knows when she needs to sleep it off. Most demons don't realize they've crossed that line until it's too late. And I think it's important to say, she still has to resist the urge to kill humans just like every other demon. The difference is that she's just aware of the temptation sooner. She can sense it building in her body a little faster. And then yet another piece could fall into place for Tanjiro. His blood alone has been keeping Nezuko satisfied for weeks at a time. At first, that seemed impossible, but if a single Marechi human provides the nutritional equivalent of 50 to 100 ordinary humans to a demon, suddenly it makes perfect sense why Tanjiro's blood has been enough to keep her calm. To me, these changes make the world of Demon Slayer feel so much more interconnected and intentional. The heightened senses stop feeling like unrelated character traits and instead become part of the same underlying mythology. And Marechi always struck me as one of the most interesting ideas in Demon Slayer, but the series never explored it as much as it could have. The idea that there are entire bloodlines of humans that are irresistible to demons, while also making them better equipped to survive encounters with demons, it just really feels like something that should be central to the world's mythology. Right now, though, the drum demon is closing in. Tanjiro charges into battle, but the drum demon's attacks constantly shift the room around him. The demon grows impatient for Marechi blood. Still injured from his previous fight, Tanjiro struggles. He would be thinking to himself, I have to do this. I'm the eldest son. That old weight again. The same one that's been sitting on him since the start of his journey. Using his heightened sense of smell, he predicts the demon's movements, close the distance, and decapitate him. In the last second before the body disintegrates, he takes a blood sample for Lady Tamayo. Outside the house, Tanjiro discovers Zenitsu protecting Nezuko's box while Inosuke is attacking him. After realizing there was likely a demon inside Tanjiro's box, he immediately tried to kill whatever was inside. Zenitsu refuses to move, having endured multiple hits because Tanjiro told him the box was worth protecting. We're gonna change this scene. Instead of Inosuke just attacking the box, I think it'd be more interesting if he could kick it from Zenitsu's grasp, sending it rolling across the ground, and the box would pop open. Luckily, they're still under the cover of trees, so the shade's protecting Nezuko. And Nezuko would emerge, and she'd be in a defensive stance immediately. She's warning him right now, like a low growl would be escaping her throat. And for a moment, it looks like something bad is going to happen between these two. Nezuko and Inosuke will be squaring off. Neither of them are backing down. And she is definitely capable of defending herself when she feels threatened, instead of just being magically harmless to humans. Like she's willing to rip out Inosuke's throat. But Tanjiro doesn't let it escalate between them and lands a punch on Inosuke hard enough to crack her rib, which would give Nezuko a chance to scramble back into her box. Tanjiro is actually forced to explain why he's carrying a demon with him. He can't leave this question unanswered to Zenitsu and Inosuke here, because Inosuke literally just attempted to kill his sister. Inosuke will not let go of this easily. So Tanjiro could explain to the boys, this is my sister, she has not and will never hurt a human being, and I'm looking for a cure to turn her back into a human. Zenitsu could ask, do you have special permission to let her live? Do the Demon Slayer higher-ups know that you're traveling with her? And Tanjiro, not completely sure himself, could say something like, well, my trainer knows, and this Demon Slayer guy named Gyu knows, so yeah, I think so. That's when Tanjiro's crow reappears and orders the group to move on, and they leave the Nezuko stuff alone for now. Since if the Demon Slayer leadership supposedly already knows, and they haven't stopped Tanjiro by now, what right do Zenitsu and Inosuke have to stop him? Before leaving, Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke say goodbye to the three siblings. What if we added that the Marechi boy that they just saved from the house turns to Tanjiro before they leave? And he could say, I want to be just like you one day when I'm older. I'm going to join the Demon Slayer Corps too, which could be a nod to the idea that I mentioned earlier, that Marechi people are much more likely to join the Demon Slayer ranks. And he could thank Tanjiro for saving him, and to honor him, he swears to keep his secret about his sister. So the three boys start traveling together. Inosuke's wild aggression and Zenitsu's anxious energy constantly clash, with Tanjiro playing straight man to both of them. Seriously, the moment those two show up, the show suddenly feels way more alive. The three boys arrive at a property where the crow orders them to stay the night. An elderly woman recognizes them as demon slayers and welcomes them inside, providing food, clothing, and a place to recover. The boys eventually try to fall asleep, but then Zenitsu sits up. In the original, this is the moment he finally asks Tanjiro why he's traveling with a demon, but in my version, that conversation already happened earlier. So this moment instead becomes Zenitsu asking how Nezuko is staying alive without eating humans. Like, how is she not going feral? And this is the first time Tanjiro has to outright lie to his friends. The same thing he did when he was living with his trainer Urokodaki. He tells him Nezuko survives on animal flesh. Again, a half lie, because throughout the story, Nezuko really could be hunting animals. Maybe every night she goes and hunts to top off her hunger between feedings, in the stretches between drinking Tanjiro's Marechi blood. That's when Nezuko fidgets in the box, and Zenitsu freaks out. Even though in my version, he already knows there's a demon in there, he's still terrified of demons, and the fact that one is calmly living inside Tanjiro's box is definitely not something his brain knows how to handle. Nezuko climbs out of the box, and despite his paralyzing fear of her, Zenitsu can't help but think she's pretty, which leads to a pretty funny conflict I'd like to add in here. Instead of Zenitsu instantly falling into the same obsessive crush pattern he has with basically every girl in the original, I'd like it to be more of a push and pull situation. Like, he could be genuinely terrified of Nezuko, but also, against his better judgment, finds himself with a little crush on her. And those feelings could exist at the same time and have some pretty funny contradictions, because his fear of demons doesn't disappear just because she's cute. I want to feel like he has a crush on Michael Myers, like, wow, he's so manly and stoic, while also remembering, oh right, he's a mute serial killer. So when Nezuko climbs out, Zenitsu could scoot backwards across the floor on his hands to get as far away from her as possible in the room, but he can't stop looking at her and thinking she's cute while he's doing it. And Nezuko could like tilt her head at him, like confused by his reaction, and he could yelp and scramble the rest of the way back into the corner of the room. Meanwhile, the old lady of the house walks over while Inosuke is sitting alone outside and offers him some new clothes. In my version, I'd like Inosuke to sit out there very frustrated, like a demon's being allowed to wander around in their shared room, and he's still trying to figure out how he feels about the whole thing. Because remember, I added that Nezuko and Inosuke had a nearly deadly confrontation when they first met. I don't want Inosuke to just get over the fight with Tanjiro and Nezuko so quickly. Sure, he's not the sharpest guy, same as the original, but he's still a human being. He feels weird that this Tanjiro kid has been traveling around with a demon this whole time. The crow returns to deliver their next assignment, head northeast to another mountain. In the original, all three boys simply thank the old lady on their way out and leave. But in my version, while Inosuke and Zenitsu are thanking her, Tanjiro should slip away with Nezuko, because it's the first chance he's been able to break away from these boys, since they're always by his side now. Now he has to hide that he feeds Nezuko his blood, just the same way he used to with Urokodaki. But before Nezuko could get a full meal, I'd like Inosuke and Zenitsu to start yelling for Tanjiro, saying, "Tanjiro, we gotta go, where are you?" Like they're kind of clingy friends, which would startle him mid-feeding and cut it short. So Tanjiro would put Nezuko back in her box and hurry up to catch up with them. Night falls and they're almost at the mountain, and Tanjiro would be uneasy because Nezuko didn't get a full meal earlier, and her energy can't be great because of it. And the thing is, he doesn't want to risk having her out hunting animals to top her off, because there could be demons potentially lurking nearby. Zenitsu gets spooked as the mountain comes into view. In the original, Tanjiro catches the scent and takes off running ahead, with Inosuke close behind. But in my version, I like it so Inosuke would outpace him and shout something like, "I'll handle this. You and your weird demon sister should buzz off." Like a dig that would establish that Inosuke still looks down on Tanjiro for protecting a demon. Their dynamic isn't as smooth and immediate as their original friendship. Tanjiro's gonna have to earn Inosuke's trust on this mountain. As Tanjiro and Inosuke climb, they discover there's a bunch of captured demon slayers trapped in spider webs, forced to turn against each other like puppets under someone else's control. News of the massacre reaches the leader of the Demon Slayer Corps. Realizing the situation is far more dangerous than a normal mission, the Corps decides that a Hashira must be sent in to investigate. The episode then introduces Shinobu, who is shown alongside Gyu as the two Hashira chosen for the mission. Tanjiro and Inosuke encounter more controlled demon slayers. Tanjiro realizes that they're still alive and tries to avoid hurting them. A young demon boy appears and reveals that the demons on the mountain are part of a twisted family, working together under a strange hierarchy. They encounter another demon girl. She flees, revealing herself to be a distraction that leads them into a fight with the powerful father spider demon. Elsewhere on the mountain, Gyu and Shinobu arrive. Shinobu suggests they split up to cover more ground. These two have a lot of interactions throughout the season, and in the original, I guess their dynamic was meant to be lighthearted somewhat. Like Shinobu teases Gyu for being antisocial, joking that nobody likes him. I guess it kind of is hinting that she's getting him to open up more, but I don't know. What if there was a real tangible friction between them? Like they could actually clash and genuinely not like each other. Because watching the original, Shinobu struck me as a little detached, almost psycho, like something was very off about her pleasant exterior. She felt very low on empathy to me. Gyu, meanwhile, plays cold and distant on the surface, but he's already shown shown he has a soft spot for Tanjiro and Nezuko early on, he just reads as more open-hearted to me. And naturally, I think these two characters would clash. Like, quite frankly, these two remind me of Zuko and Azula from Avatar The Last Airbender a little bit. With Azula, or Shinobu in this case, trying to one-up her more tender-hearted counterpart. But back to the fight, Tanjiro and Inosuke are up against the father spider demon, whose enormous size and strength make him nearly impossible to defeat. Tanjiro uses his water-breathing techniques to cut down a massive tree and trap the father spider demon beneath it, but the attack fails. The demon breaks free, sending Tanjiro flying through the air. The impact could knock the box containing Nezuko off of Tanjiro's back, and Nezuko would spill out of it. She could land right next to Inosuke, because I always found it very boring in the original that most of the time on Spider Mountain, Nezuko's just asleep in Tanjiro's box. Like, nearly every major fight on Spider Mountain happens without her. And it felt like such a missed opportunity. Like, Nezuko's one of the main characters. I want her more actively involved. So in my version, maybe Nezuko has been wanting to fight along Tanjiro up here. She wants to help her brother, but Tanjiro keeps stopping her. Nezuko, no, these demons are stronger than anything we've ever faced yet. Let me handle this. But from Nezuko's perspective, it could be very frustrating. Like, she's already proven that she can fight alongside him. She's protected him before. He knows that she can control herself. And yet Tanjiro keeps sidelining her. So now Tanjiro is being thrown across the mountain. And with Tanjiro out of the fight, Inosuke suddenly finds himself alone with the spider father. Except now, Nezuko's beside him. Inosuke could mutter like, "Oh brother, I'm stuck babysitting Tanjiro's demon sister mid-fight." Back with Tanjiro, he's falling, breaking his fall with a water wheel, and he could already be sprinting back to where he left Nezuko. But then he discovers the demon girl being threatened by the main demon boy controlling the mountain. The demon insists that they are a real family, but Tanjiro can tell through his heightened sense of smell that their relationship is built on fear and manipulation, not love. The main demon boy is furious Tanjiro would dare question his family's bond. Meanwhile, Inosuke is doing everything he can to avoid getting crushed by the spider father. He's dodging attacks, trying to figure out an opening, and probably telling Nezuko to get out of the way too. He could say, "You're gonna get torn apart if you stay here. You're in my way." And the two of them could end up hiding out together behind like a tree or something, trying to avoid the spider dad. And Inosuke could say, "Your brother is going to kill me if these demons don't. Get back in your box." And this is where I'd make another change to the original scene, because in the anime, Inosuke reaches a point where he actually starts retreating from fear. He ends up getting mad at himself for acting like a coward and turns back to the fight. We can totally keep that emotional beat, but I'd like to change what triggers it. In my version, let's have Nezuko move first. She could launch herself at the spider father, using the same powerful kick she's relied on throughout the story. And she knows she's outmatched, but she's not willing to leave Tanjiro's ally behind. And for a second, Inosuke could stop, like watching her do this, and then he could be like, "What am I doing? I'm running away while Tanjiro's weird demon sister is fighting for me? There's no way I'm gonna let her outdo me." And that's what pushes him to turn around and go back to fighting. So the two of them could fight together, and Nezuko would keep this demon off balance, landing hits and forcing him to react. She could even take a heavy blow herself, but she wouldn't back down. And that gives Inosuke the opening he needs. Using her distraction, he would slip into the demon's blind spot and manage to cut off one of Spider-Father's arms. The demon retreats. And as Inosuke runs after him, he could look back at Nezuko and say, "I've got this, go find your brother." Nezuko would nod and take off to find Tanjiro. I like this rewritten scene because it would be a good turning point for their relationship. I think it would be a realistic build to them becoming allies. Because in the original scene when Inosuke first meets Nezuko, their first interaction is very brutal. Like, having them fight side by side against the spider dad feels like a natural way for them to start moving past that. Because wouldn't it be nice if there was a slow build of Nezuko earning trust with Tanjiro's friend group? It would eventually give Tanjiro real support inside the core, like him having a loyal squad to back him up when things get hard, willing to vouch for his sister, and their unconventional approach to demon slaying. Having Nezuko fight alongside Inosuke here too could plant the idea that demon slayers teaming up with cooperative demons could help on hard missions, maybe even against the Demon King himself one day. And Inosuke throughout season 1 clearly admires Tanjiro's tenacity and courage, and I like the idea of that admiration extending to Nezuko too, since Nezuko and Tanjiro do share that trait. Meanwhile, Tanjiro continues fighting the main demon boy, but the moment he swings, the demon's webbing slashes through his sword, shattering it. It's a frightening moment, especially because Nezuko's not here to back him up in my version. In the original, Nezuko is just alongside him through this whole stretch, out of the way, waiting for this to play out. But in my version, she's sprinting through the woods after fighting the spider dad, and she's totally exhausted, struggling to move fast. Partly from that fight, but mostly because she hasn't had a lot of Tanjiro's blood recently. But she can't stop to recharge with a nap. Not now. And it's a good thing she's hurrying over, because Tanjiro's sword is shattered, and he finds himself overwhelmed by the main spider demon's deadly webs. Just as the attack is about to become fatal, Nezuko intervenes and protects her brother by taking the blow herself. And that defensive move that Nezuko just did could tie into something that she picked up earlier when she was watching Lady Tamayo and her assistant back in Tokyo. Because remember, I added that Lady Tamayo and Yushiro were using their own bodies to shield Tanjiro during a fight, so Nezuko will be copying that technique. The demon is rattled by witnessing a genuine bond between Tanjiro and Nezuko, something he desperately wants but can't understand. He now wants Nezuko for himself and offers to spare Tanjiro only if he gives up his sister. As the fight continues, the demon reveals himself to be one of the 12 Kizuki. Tanjiro is caught off guard when the demon uses his threads to capture Nezuko, and Tanjiro is terrified because he knows that if he dies here, Nezuko won't just die with him. She'll end up living out her life as this thing's twisted idea of a sister, stripped of everything human in her. Because there's nothing that scares Tanjiro more than the idea that his sister will be forced to live a demonic way of life. As Tanjiro struggles against the demon, He remembers his childhood with Nezuko and their father. He recalls his dad teaching him the importance of controlling his breathing and remembering the family's traditional Kagura dance. Tanjiro also remembers the day his father passed down the family's Hanafuda earrings to him, the same earrings that caught Muzan's attention in Tokyo because they were once worn by a legendary swordsman centuries ago. He realizes that his family's dance was not merely a tradition, but a hidden legacy passed down through generations. The original and most powerful breathing technique created by the first swordsman who challenged Muzan. And this is why I think my earlier setup of this dance in episode 1 matters so much. Because in the original story, this technique appears out of nowhere when the plot needs it. It does not have as much build-up as it should. By establishing from the very beginning that Tanjiro has been practicing this dance since he was a kid, that his dad desperately wanted him to practice it every single day, this reveal has weight now. It feels like something that's been part of Tanjiro's story all along, not a new ability suddenly unlocked at the perfect moment. Tanjiro abandons water breathing and returns to the movements he learned as a child. Although he's not practiced the dance in years, his body remembers the movements he repeated through his childhood, allowing the rhythm, steps, and breathing technique passed down through his family to guide him. Nezuko's blood demon art awakens for the first time, damaging the demon's threads and creating an opening for Tanjiro. Even with only a broken piece of his sword remaining, Tanjiro cuts off the demon's head. However, both siblings are left exhausted and injured. Tanjiro crawls toward her, and he wants to get her some of his blood. She's completely drained and he wants to help. Just as Tanjiro believes the battle is over, he senses fresh blood and realizes the demon boy survived. The demon had used his own threads to sever his head before Tanjiro's attack could land, allowing him to escape death. Gyu arrives and reassures Tanjiro that he did well holding on until help arrived, taking over the fight himself and defeating him. As the demon boy's body begins to disappear, he reaches towards Tanjiro and Nezuko, and Tanjiro senses the pain and regret behind his actions. Tanjiro offers him a final moment of compassion by reaching out before he fades away. Meanwhile, the sister demon flees through the woods, only for Shinobu to intervene, kicking her down and pinning her. "Someone's forcing me to do this," the sister pleads. Shinobu's response is ice cold. "Okay, I'll save you. But first, how many people have you killed?" The demon says, 5 humans, but I was ordered to. Shinobu says, "No need to lie. You've eaten at least 80. Shinobu's musing casually that a fitting punishment might be gouging out her eyes or cutting her open, matching the pain this demon has caused sin for sin. When I first watched this scene, I thought the story was setting up Shinobu to be super dangerous, like an eventual threat to Tanjiro and Nezuko within the Demon Slayer core. The show doesn't go in that direction, which really disappointed me, so I'm definitely changing that. Because yes, demons have killed people. They're totally sadistic. They do terrible things. But the way Shinobu handles killing demons is the exact opposite of how Tanjiro operates. It seems closer to cruelty than self-defense or justice. That's when Shinobu arrives and immediately notices Nezuko. She's calm and polite and almost cheerful about killing Nezuko, which makes her character all the more unsettling. Someone who presents herself as kind and graceful, but who has developed an extremely detached relationship with violence. Gyu tells Tanjiro to grab Nezuko and run, and he'll hold Shinobu off. As Tanjiro runs, the reality of the situation could sink in for him. There is no way the Corps would ever sanction one of their own traveling with a demon like he's been doing, let alone one being kept alive on his own blood. And not to mention his secret arrangement with Lady Tamayo. He has been kidding himself. There is no way this could have stayed under the radar forever, mingling with all these demons without anybody knowing. Meanwhile, Gyu's got Shinobu in a headlock, and I'd love to push this further than the original does. Like, let's make Shinobu seriously threaten him. She wants him to get in serious trouble with the Demon Slayer leader. Like, I want her to be a problem for these main characters, Gyu included. But then a crow interrupts with a message. Tanjiro and Nezuko are to be taken into custody and brought back to the Demon Slayer headquarters. Tanjiro awakens bound and surrounded by the Hashira, the highest ranking members of the Corps. Because they know he's been traveling with a demon, he's brought forward for judgment, with many of the Hashira already believing that both Tanjiro and Nezuko should be executed. Tanjiro notices Gyu among the group, realizing he's also in hot water. Gyu also violated the Corps rules by allowing Tanjiro and Nezuko to live. Tanjiro begins explaining that Nezuko is his younger sister. However, his injuries make it difficult for him to speak clearly. In the original, Shinobu offers him water laced with a painkiller to help him out, but I want to cut this. I don't want her to show him any kindness at all here. Let's keep her cold towards Tanjiro. Anyway, Tanjiro manages to get out that his sister has never hurt anyone. The Hashira don't buy it though. Of course he'd say that. A new Hashira steps forward, carrying Nezuko's box. He declares that a demon could never be trusted. And to prove his point, he stabs through the box and wounds Nezuko inside. But the arrival of the Demon Slayer Corps leader interrupts the confrontation. The Master appears before the group. The Hashira show their deep respect for the Master, bowing as he arrives. The Master calmly reveals that he personally approved Tanjiro's arrangement with Nezuko and asks the Hashira to accept his decision. Some of the Hashira push back, others stay indifferent, or fall in line simply because the Master said so. But I'd like it to be clear, more than the original, that not a single one of them is actually happy about this. And I want Shinobu to be one of the ones that definitely opposes it. Silently for now, she's not going to be arguing, just watching, calculating, and she can be very disappointed in how the Master's choosing to handle this. The Master reveals that Urokodaki, Tanjiro's trainer and a former Hashira himself, advocated for both Tanjiro and his sister, that Nezuko retains her strength and her human reason, and that even starved, she doesn't turn on humans. And right here, Tanjiro would need to keep his face neutral because it's not the whole truth, and only he knows where that little bit of human blood she's been feeding on is coming from. Urokodaki went further apparently, telling the master that if Nezuko ever attacked a human, both he and Gyu will atone through seppuku. Tanjiro is moved by that deeply, but also terrified. If the Hashira ever learn the actual truth about how he's been keeping his sister alive, that promise is going to become a death sentence for these two men. Two men that trusted him. He knows the Hashira will not allow any room for nuance. No human flesh, no human blood. Anything will prove Nezuko guilty. And I think this makes Urokodaki's role in the story stronger, because in the original, his testimony on behalf of the siblings feels a little bit undermined, because he knows Nezuko was influenced by the hypnosis he placed on her, the one preventing her from attacking any humans and to see all of humanity as her family. So when he vouches for her self-control, most of that confidence comes from him believing that his own hypnosis spell worked. That's not very meaningful in my opinion. But in my version, Urokodaki's hypnosis does not exist. So when Urokodaki tells the court that Nezuko can be trusted, he's staking his reputation entirely on his own judgment. He believes to his core that Nezuko has the strength to control herself completely on her own. That's when the white-haired Hashira decides to test whether Nezuko can resist her demonic instincts. Knowing his rare Marechi blood would be especially tempting to demons, he cuts his arm and uses the scent of his blood as bait, provoking her by forcing her to expose her true nature. And this is where my version has completely raised the stakes here, because Nezuko hasn't fed in over 2 weeks. And between traveling with Inosuke and Zenitsu, the chaos of everything that was happening on Spider Mountain, and fighting with all these demons, she's drained. And she's starting to slip back toward that same animalistic state Tanjiro saw early in her journey. In the original story, the scene is framed as a terrifying test. Will Nezuko finally lose control and attack a human? But honestly, it never felt fully convincing to me that this was even a risk, because the original story never showed Nezuko struggling with that temptation ever. From the beginning, she had the hypnosis placed on her that prevented her from viewing humans as food. So there was never an indication that she was fighting that instinct within herself. But now, my rewrite has made the situation completely different. The danger is real. Nezuko actually does have to fight herself. Inside the box, she's growling, sweating, trembling, forcing herself to stay still, because the scent of Marechi blood is overwhelming. The same type of blood she's been feeding on in her brother. So she's surrounded by exactly what her body is craving, and there is no guarantee she can hold back. Tanjiro watches helplessly as the Hashira cuts open the box with his sword, forcing Nezuko to emerge. The white-haired Hashira lets his blood drip in front of her. Nezuko's eyes lock onto it. Somehow Nezuko is still holding, but in my version, she will not be able to last for long. Tanjiro finally breaks free and rushes towards Nezuko, calling out to her. His voice brings back memories from their past. She remembers fragments of her life as a human, including her family. Instead of having Nezuko's resistance influenced by Urokodaki's hypnotic suggestion, Nezuko's choice to resist comes from her own memories, her own emotions, her own sense of self. She creates her own belief. Humans are meant to be protected and saved, because I said so, and ultimately turns away from the blood, rejecting the temptation instead of giving in. Tanjiro is overwhelmed with relief, because even he was unsure if she could overcome that urge. Seeing her choice, the master declares that Nezuko has proven herself and allows both siblings to continue fighting as demon slayers. So the master turns to the Hashira. Don't torment Tanjiro and Nezuko too much, he says. And I'd like that request to be something that the Hashira are going to politely ignore, which will not go well for these siblings. The master says, we've concluded our business, but Shinobu speaks up immediately. Then allow me to take Tanjiro to my estate. This moment will land as very abrupt and unsettling, because Shinobu has made her suspicion of Tanjiro and Nezuko very obvious. Her view of demonkind is cold and absolute. There is no comfort in the idea of going anywhere with her. Tanjiro has little opportunity to argue, though, because the decision has been made for him. This final stretch of season 1 is where a lot of my new plot points I've written in converge. At the mansion, Kanao is there, who passed final selection alongside Tanjiro and is one of Shinobu's trainees. Kanao just watches them, saying nothing. It's an odd, unreadable welcome. And I'd like her to also quietly be staring at Tanjiro and Nezuko's box the whole time, tracking them closely, like she's been given a specific task to keep an eye on them while they're here. Zenitsu is already recovering at the Butterfly Mansion, which serves as the Demon Slayer Corps' medical facility. Tanjiro is placed in the same room as him. Inosuke is recovering nearby, unable to speak much because of his injuries. Later, Tanjiro brings Nezuko out of her box, inside the room provided for her, and blocks out the sunlight. In the original, Nezuko just falls asleep right now. But I'd rather have it so she's fighting to stay awake, because she's cranky, and she's edging further into something animalistic, trying to stay quiet because Tanjiro's begging her to. But she's so hungry. Resisting the white-haired Hashira's blood in front of everyone took everything she had. Now she needs to eat. So Tanjiro scans the room, listening, smelling the air for any sign of anyone nearby. Is there any way to feed her right now without anybody in the Butterfly Mansion finding out? And then Tanjiro notices something off about the room. Maybe his nose picks it up first. Maybe it's not just a room that Shinobu offered to him to be nice. She set it up specifically to make them easy to watch. Like maybe there's a peephole disguised in the wood paneling of the room, or a listening gap between this room and the next one over. You could even have some Butterfly Mansion attendants, those little girls that help out around the house, stationed outside of their room or listening through the walls. Maybe they'd be wandering nearby quite often under the guise of of checking in on Tanjiro and his sister, all just to gather evidence of any wrongdoing or suspicious activity these siblings have been up to. Because Shinobu would want evidence, proof that Nezuko cannot be trusted, that she's a threat somehow, something concrete to bring to the master and unravel the whole arrangement. And if that happens, it doesn't just end Tanjiro and Nezuko's life. It triggers the suicide pact, meaning that Gyu and Urokodaki will die with them, which in my version might suit Shinobu just fine, given how little she seems to think of Gyu to begin with. Like, think about how scary that would be, introducing a layer of internal espionage in Demon Slayer. Because up until now, most of the conflict has come from demons, the danger outside. Now the danger is inside too. Suddenly Tanjiro has to wonder who's watching him at all hours. Who can he trust here? Is every conversation he's having being overheard? That kind of conflict is more dangerous than just sword fights. It's psychological warfare, which means that Tanjiro isn't only trying to protect Nezuko from demons anymore. He's trying to protect her from his own side. It reminds me a little bit of Dune, because some of the story's biggest moments don't come from battles, but from the constant paranoia of not knowing who's loyal, who's spying on you, who might betray you from within. The enemy isn't always standing on the other side of the battlefield. An even better comparison, though, is the first Kung Fu Panda. The Furious Five aren't bad people, they're honorable, disciplined warriors fighting for a righteous cause. But from Poe's perspective, they're still obstacles. He has to earn their trust before they can become his allies. That's exactly the kind of dynamic I'd like here. The Hashira, Kanao, and everybody at the Butterfly Mansion aren't villains. They're trying to protect humanity. From their perspective, killing demons is the right thing to do, and Tanjiro is harboring one. That is such an interesting type of conflict compared to there just being one type of bad guy. Everyone is acting according to what they believe is right, which is very realistic. Tanjiro simply has a secret that puts him at odds with everybody else, turning the Butterfly Mansion into a place that should be safe but isn't. So Tanjiro's stuck. How the heck does he get blood to Nezuko without the mansion staff catching him in the act? That night, same as the original, the Hashira meet with the master. He tells them that the demon threat has never been worse. They need to rebuild their ranks. The white-haired Hashira points to what happened on Spider Mountain. In his eyes, the overall caliber of demon slayers has fallen dramatically. Too many recruits die young, and too few are actually capable of standing against powerful demons. What if we also had another Hashira chime in, offer an explanation for why he thinks that's happening? They could complain that Marechi bloodlines have been thinning out for generations. As Marechi families continue to get married to non-Marechi, the trait has become more and more diluted as years pass. And as a result, true Marechi are becoming rarer with each generation. And that has a ripple effect on the core, because fewer Marechi means fewer demon slayers with a heightened sense, because these naturally heightened senses they have give them an advantage in battle against demons. And the slayers without Marechi blood have to work twice as hard to keep up. I'm having it so the core's decline isn't just because demons are getting stronger, it's also because the bloodlines that have historically produced many of their most gifted fighters are slowly dying out. That idea was partly inspired by Van Helsing. In that movie, the main villain is Count Dracula, and for centuries there's been one particular family, the Valerius family, whose purpose is to kill him. Generation after generation, the Valerius bloodline dedicated their lives to hunting Dracula, but each generation failed and died. By the time the movie begins, Dracula has spent centuries systematically wiping out the bloodline that poses the greatest threat to him, leaving Anna as the family's last surviving member and its final hope of defeating him. I'm going to borrow that idea here, because if Marechi blood gives a small portion of humans a natural advantage against demons in fights, it makes sense that demons would, over the centuries, aim to wipe out those bloodlines. By the time Tanjiro's story begins, full-blooded Marechi have become so much more rare, and the Demon Slayer core is weaker because of it. But the Master wouldn't let that comment about weaker Slayers stand unchallenged. He would say, don't be so quick to dismiss my fighters without Marechi blood. For instance, Gyu over there carries none of it. He doesn't have a heightened sense to lean on, and he still stands among the finest swordsmen we have. I just really like the idea of Gyu being a true underdog in this world, which could help emphasize his constant imposter syndrome that the character has. Quick spoiler here, this is where I'd start laying the foundation for some deeper, new world building for Demon Slayer, even though none of it is revealed in Season 1. In the original story, it's eventually revealed that Muzan exists because a doctor roughly 1,000 years ago accidentally transformed him while trying to cure his terminal illness. The doctor gave the Demon King a genetic blood condition that effectively made him immortal, flesh-hungry, and lethally vulnerable to sunlight. In my version, though, I'd like to make that doctor much closer to a Victor Frankenstein type of figure, a brilliant physician obsessed with pushing medicine beyond its limits, experimenting with blood in pursuit of miracles. So in my version, Muzan wouldn't be this doctor's only accidental creation. While trying to engineer stronger, healthier blood to treat disease, this doctor accidentally creates a bloodline with extraordinarily nutrient-dense blood. As an unintended side effect, anyone carrying that blood develops at least one uniquely heightened sense. And without realizing it, this doctor created two opposing bloodlines. One bloodline becomes demonkind, stemming from the Demon King. The other is Marechi, which becomes humanity's greatest natural weapon against demons. I love the symmetry of that. One doctor's ambition accidentally creates both sides of a conflict. It taps into a truth that's biblical, where the central forces of good and evil trace back to the same creator, to the same father. The earliest Marechi families would eventually become some of the founders of the original Demon Slayer Corps. Think of the forefathers in the White Lotus from Avatar: The Last Airbender, a secret alliance of people united by a shared purpose. I'd have it so the Marechi didn't become demon slayers because they wanted to be heroic. They became hunters because demons relentlessly hunted them first. Fighting back and working together was their only way to survive. Those early Marechi swore an oath to oppose the Demon King, training their children and then their children's children, generation after generation, to carry on that mission. This also gives Muzan another reason to target Marechi families. Marechi humans could be more likely to develop unique abilities after becoming a demon, so turning a Marechi into a demon becomes far more valuable than turning an ordinary person. Turning a Marechi would be the Demon King's best shot at finally creating a demon that can survive sunlight, which is a huge goal of the Demon Kings, because he hates having the weakness of dying in the sun. From Muzan's perspective, every Marechi is either a future enemy or a potentially powerful recruit. Kill them or turn them. Either way, they will stop becoming demon slayers, which could be why Muzan targeted Tanjiro's family in the first episode. It reminds me of the Volturi in Twilight. When these vampire elites encounter someone with an unusually valuable gift, they don't like leaving them alone. They either want that person to join them or they want them gone. I give Muzan that same mindset when it comes to Marechi. They're simply too valuable and too dangerous to be left alone. None of this is information that the audience would learn in season 1 though. It's just a hidden mythology underpinning everything, plus my new additions to it. Okay, back to the scene. After the meeting ends and the others leave, another Hashira asks Shinobu what she intends to do about Tanjiro and Nezuko's situation. Shinobu doesn't reveal her plans, and that silence is deliberate. She wants to prove the master wrong for letting Tanjiro and Nezuko live, and underneath her calm, cool exterior, she is pissed at the master. Why did you not execute them when you had the chance? Alright, so we're cutting to a new scene I'm adding in my rewrite. Back at the Butterfly Mansion, Tanjiro's already got a plan in motion. He's planning on nicking a little cut into his body. Somewhere the mansion attendants wouldn't look, as they're doing medical checkups on him every day. Maybe it would be on his scalp, hidden under his hair, or somewhere along his inner arm, or it could be on his earlobe, hidden beneath his earring. I like that option best. His story to the mansion girls would be that he needs to go watch over Nezuko while she hunts at night, while she goes and hunts animals, because her diet's animal only and he doesn't like being separated from her out of safety concerns. But the real plan is different. He's going to get her alone in the woods long enough to feed her some of his blood from maybe his earlobe cut before her instincts spiral any further. So while Nezuko is straining to hold herself together, ravenous, he would tell her, let's go hunt for some animals, okay? The cover story for anybody who asks. And it's how the Butterfly Mansion gives Tanjiro permission for him and his sister to leave the grounds at night. Out in the woods away from the Butterfly Mansion, Nezuko finally gets a real meal. Finally gets some drops of blood from Tanjiro after weeks of waiting. And that buys them roughly 2 more weeks before her hunger strikes again. So everything goes according to plan, mostly. On their way back inside, Tanjiro would catch Kanao and a couple of the younger mansion girls giving him a look. And he'd offer up an excuse, the one he prepared. We were out hunting animals tonight. And it seems convincing enough to them. But Kanao's eyes linger on him a little bit, a beat longer than the others. There's no evidence of wrongdoing yet. Nothing Kanao can tell Shinobu when she returns from the Hashira meeting, but she has a feeling something's up. That morning at the mansion, Kanao arrives and starts Tanjiro's rehabilitation training. The rehabilitation involves reflex exercises. Kanao challenges them with drills designed to improve their reaction speed, but her movements are far beyond anything the boys can match. Her incredible ability comes from her heightened sense of sight. The girls helping with rehabilitation ask Tanjiro whether he's mastered maintaining total concentration breathing 24/7. He admits he didn't know such a thing was possible. They explain that maintaining it at all times, even while sleeping, greatly increases a demon slayer's abilities. Tanjiro begins practicing total concentration breathing nonstop. He goes back to his old drills from Urokodaki. And I'd like to also bring back the footwork from the fire breathing dance. Not the full technique, but just enough to keep his body familiar with it without pushing himself too hard. Since going full force with the dance could hurt him, Tanjiro's strength begins returning. He focuses on slow, controlled breathing, learning to direct each breath throughout his entire body. One night, while Tanjiro practices his breathing on the mansion roof, Shinobu joins him. Tanjiro already knows that Shinobu's had eyes on him and Nezuko this whole time, that she's watching for them to slip up. So he'd be on edge being alone with her up here. During the conversation, Tanjiro notices something about Shinobu. Whenever he's around her, he can detect a frustration and pain that she tries to keep buried. In the original, Shinobu admits that Tanjiro is right. She is angry. That anger has remained with her ever since a demon killed her older sister. Shinobu explains that her sister was a kind and compassionate person who believed demons could be shown mercy. Unlike her sister, Shinobu has never been able to feel that same sympathy towards demons. Shinobu would still struggle with the belief that demons can't change, especially when she spent years witnessing their cruelty and loss of humanity. In the original, despite her doubts, Shinobu eventually reassures Tanjiro and tells him to continue protecting Nezuko, admitting that seeing him fight so hard gives her hope. I don't want that. I'd rather have it so this conflict with Shinobu remains unsolved, instead of having her immediately accept Tanjiro's perspective. Let's keep some internal friction with the Demon Slayer group. So instead, let's have it so she does not trust Tanjiro yet, at all. So before she leaves, she says something much more threatening to him, that her hatred is aimed at every demon, Nezuko included. And that if everything he's claimed about his sister turns out to be true, she's never killed any humans, she's never eaten any humans, it's only a matter of time before that isn't true anymore. And when that day comes, Shinobu says that she will be the first one to go to the master and then end both of their lives herself. Tanjiro's breathing would stop completely at this. Shinobu could just smile at him and be like, you stopped your total concentration breathing. Don't forget to keep practicing. She'd be very patronizing about it. And then she leaves. I think making her a little psycho is so the move for her character. So then Tanjiro would take a few minutes to steady himself after that really crazy conversation, and then he'd pick his breathing back up, but the stress is still there. And that night, he and Nezuko would run the same routine as before. They'd slip out under the same cover story to go hunt for animals in the woods outside the mansion. And he'd prick his earlobe, and the routine works again, undetected by anyone else. For now, they're safe. Maybe other ways they could keep their cover intact would be staggering the timing so the feeding never falls on the same night twice in a row. They're trying not to have any patterns form for people to notice. Maybe they even keep hunting animals to bring back carcasses so there's physical evidence backing up the lie in case anyone checks. He could even use the noise of his total concentration breathing practice as cover while he's feeding Nezuko, in case Zenitsu has a listening ear nearby. Because he's already expected to be up at odd hours practicing the breathing, there could be a lot of little tricks they're doing to make sure that this stays secret. And you could have Kanao quietly following them one night, like while they're hunting out in the woods. But Tanjiro's heightened sense of smell would let him realize that someone else is out there and that she's nearby. He deliberately would change his route, leading Nezuko farther out into the trees, maybe using the terrain to break Kanao's line of sight at them, and they could eventually lose her. The next morning, Tanjiro continues his rehabilitation training, and this is when Shinobu encourages Kanao to join the others in their breathing training, but Kanao simply nods, smiles, and walks away without saying anything. She watches the boys train from a distance, and when faced with a decision, Kanao flips a coin, revealing that she relies on chance to guide her choices because she doesn't trust herself to decide on her own. Kanao's backstory reveals the trauma behind her quiet and passive nature. She grew up in extreme poverty, suffering abuse and neglect before being sold off by her parents. Years later, Shinobu and her older sister encountered Kanao, and Shinobu's sister brought her freedom. After bringing Kanao home, Shinobu and her sister discovered how deeply her trauma affected her. Kanao would not make decisions for herself. Shinobu's sister gave her a coin and taught her to flip it whenever she needed guidance. The coin became Kanao's way of navigating life. And Shinobu's older sister believed that someday, when Kanao formed a connection with someone, she would begin learning to open her heart and make choices for herself. Back in the present, it's clear that Kanao was secretly smitten with Tanjiro as he trains nearby. But here's the thing, in the original, there's no reason to really care about Kanao. She barely speaks, barely interacts with Tanjiro, so this blooming romance is falling flat for me. But I have a good way to change it. The next day, Tanjiro continues training against Kanao and finally reaches her level. Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke are officially cleared to return to missions, so Tanjiro finds Kanao sitting on the porch of the Butterfly Mansion and thanks her for everything she did during his rehabilitation. Try to make nice conversation with her. Kanao responds with her usual quiet smile and flips her coin before answering him, explaining that she was only following her teacher's orders and he doesn't need to thank her. Surprised that she spoke to him, Tanjiro asks about the coin she relies on so often. Kanao eventually admits that she uses it to decide what to do because she struggles to make choices. Tanjiro asks to borrow the coin and flips it himself, saying that this decision should determine whether she starts following her own heart instead of leaving everything to chance. The coin lands on heads, and Tanjiro tells Kanao that she should now trust her own heart when making decisions. For the first time, someone encourages her to rely on herself rather than the coin. She's got a real crush on him now. The next morning, a crow arrives at the Butterfly Mansion with a new mission. Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke are ordered to head west and prepare to leave. That night, as Tanjiro is preparing to leave, he goes to gather Nezuko. She's been asleep most of the day, maybe sleeping more than usual actually, which would be deliberate on her part, stretching out how long she can go between feedings, since sneaking blood to her when they're under the Butterfly Mansion's roof has gotten harder and harder. She sits up, she's hungry. And Tanjiro would realize right then that they need to get her fed before they leave on their mission tomorrow. Like they're leaving in a few hours. It's already almost dawn. Missions are about to swallow up all of his time, and you know how Zenitsu and Inosuke are. On the road, they're always right next to him. So if they don't do this now, there won't be an easy chance to feed Nezuko again for a while. So that night, they slip out for one more feeding before leaving the Butterfly Mansion. It'll be quick, it's routine by now, except the timing's bad, because dawn's closer than it should be. Tanjiro has been up since 4 that morning getting ready for the mission. He'd lost track of how close they were cutting it this morning. Out in the woods, he'd make his usual small cut, and he lets her feed. And that's when I'd have Kanao walk by, fetching water from the well. She's doing early morning chores for the mansion. And this is when her morning routine's already started. She's an early riser. With her sight, sharp enough to cut through trees in a distance that most people couldn't see through, she catches sight of them. Kanao's like, is that Nezuko? Drinking Tanjiro's blood? Tanjiro smells Kanao before he sees her. He's up and he's moving instantly, closing the distance between them. And he grabs her by both shoulders, desperate, saying, Kanao, please, it's not what it looks like. And he tells her the truth. He says, Nezuko's never eaten or attacked a human, I swear. What she's doing right now is just having such a small amount of my blood. It's really just proof of how much restraint she has. It's not evidence against her. This is what's been keeping her stable. So Kanao, please, you have to understand. Shinobu's been watching us this whole time, waiting for a reason to hand us over, to execute us. Not even Inosuke and Zenitsu know about this. Please listen to me. Even though he's trying to explain himself, he is panicking. And he thinks this is the end of the road for him and his sister. Not to mention, he thinks he's just sentenced Urokodaki and Giyu to death too. Because even though Nezuko hasn't attacked any humans, he knows the Demon Slayer Corps will not allow any nuance. Blood feeding will make him just as guilty in their eyes. He's still been lying. And in this moment, Kanao could look down at the coin in her hand. Tanjiro would be holding his breath, terrified to see what she's going to do. But for the first time, she doesn't flip the coin. I won't tell anyone, she says. And Tanjiro would just stare at her, totally thrown, not expecting that answer at all. Because Tanjiro is the one who told Kanao to stop letting the coin decide things for her. It would be the first decision that Kanao has ever made from her own heart. She has chosen to protect him, which makes Kanao the only other person who knows the full truth of what Tanjiro and Nezuko have been doing. Tanjiro can smell how sure Kanao is, how honest she's being. There's no hesitation in her at all. And so he trusts her completely, and he pulls her into a hug, just overwhelmed with gratitude and relief. And Kanao's face could get all red, and she probably wouldn't hug him back because she's not the most socially well-adjusted gal, but her actions in keeping the secret mean so much. And with this scene added, Tanjiro and Kanao's relationship gets so much deeper than the original. Kanao isn't just a side character anymore. She's someone with real stakes in the story now, someone worth caring about. She is Tanjiro's ride or die. And she's someone who has proven that she has a more open mind and a more compassionate heart than other demon slayers. And this makes her stand out among the cast, which I think is a great thing to do for a main character's love interest. So back to the final scenes, the three boys leave, but not without Tanjiro and Kanao holding eye contact for a moment. And then he would give her one last smile, and then he'd leave. So my version of season 1 ends similarly to the original, with a train traveling down the tracks as a new demon threat awaits aboard. However, those future arcs are something to explore another time. This concludes my rewritten version of Demon Slayer Season 1. The goal behind these changes was to make Tanjiro and Nezuko's journey feel more tense and emotionally grounded from the beginning. I want their relationships, conflicts, and victories to come with more weight and surround them with allies who have more complicated motivations. And over time, Nezuko could become less dependent on his blood. However, when the truth does come out, the Hashira would of course see it as Tanjiro deceiving the court for years. And that deception would create so many interesting character conflicts. How would Zenitsu and Inosuke react after discovering Tanjiro kept something so important from them? Would they feel betrayed? These conflicts would come directly from the characters' decisions rather than relying on simple misunderstandings. And these changes seriously level up Tanjiro and Kanao's relationship. Like I said, she's now his ride or die. It's so much more romantic and high stakes. Her keeping his secret for him gives you a reason to care about Kanao. More than anything, I wanted Tanjiro to feel like a believable protagonist from the beginning. Someone who has to make difficult choices, who makes mistakes, who hides uncomfortable truths, and someone who has to actively earn people's trust instead of receiving acceptance so easily. Because his struggles make it easier for me to root for him from episode 1, instead of feeling like I'm waiting for the story to get good later. I also really wanted the world-building elements like Marechi, heightened senses, the Demon Slayer core's origin, and the Demon King's plans to feel more interconnected, making the world feel developed and intentional, rather than being separate ideas introduced only when the plot needs them. Of course, this is all just my take. If you think these changes would create problems for later in the story, or really don't fit the characters as well as the original story does, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what worked, what didn't, whether you think these changes would hurt or improve Demon Slayer's story. But yeah, thanks for watching.